Chapter 448. Fukasaku Senin and Shima Senin made a sound that was difficult for humans to make. Tendo Pain and Mundo Pain, who were facing this kind of ninjutsu, only felt that the space around them seemed to be distorted, and the scene around them, which originally had the style of the Rain Country, had begun to change. The heavenly Tao and the mortal Tao were both bound in the illusory space created by Toad's song. The slightly transparent cube enveloped the heavenly Tao and the mortal Tao. And around this very special-looking cube, there were 4 huge toads that had both the characteristics of toads and the characteristics of the legendary Echolantha. Each of them held a huge, long sword in their hands, and their eyes were fixed on Tendo and Mundo. It seemed that they were waiting for Jiraiya's order to help Jiraiya slaughter the 2 little insects that had been trapped in it. Pain. No, Nagato. I'll give you one last chance. As long as you are willing to give up your unrealistic plan to threaten the whole world, I'm willing to release you and let you leave safely. Jiraiya's figure slowly appeared in front of Pain. Separated by a transparent wall, Jiraiya spoke to his original disciple again. After all, Nagato, Yahiko, and Konan had lived with him for 3 years. Jiraiya regarded them as his own nephews and nephews. Now that Tendo and Rindo had been trapped in Toad's final song, Jiraiya wanted to give Pain a chance to change his mind, and it spread like crazy grass in his heart. Jiraiya, in the Jinjutsu space, Shima Senin looked at the soft-hearted Jiraiya and opened her mouth to say something, but she was stopped by her husband, Fukasaku Senin. Although he didn't know Pain that well, according to the child's previous words and attitude towards the world, Fukasaku Senin didn't think that Jiraiya's soft-heartedness could move this person who had turned his heart into stone. Now, no matter what, Tendo Pain and Mundo have been trapped in the Jinjutsu space. Although this Jinjutsu space didn't have the perception of controlling time like Itachi Uchiha's Tsukuyomi, it also had a strong binding effect. Once it was cast, it couldn't be broken through in an ordinary way. Jiraiya himself has such a kind temperament, especially in the face of his old friends. Such a temperament is always unavoidable. Such a temperament is a great shortcoming for a ninja, but it is precisely because of such a temperament that Jiraiya seems to be more precious. Compared with the ruthless Jiraiya, even if he had some compassion, this kind of Jiraiya made Fukasaku Senin love and felt more real. That's why Fukasaku Senin's words, after all, those hurtful words not only hurt others, but also hurt themselves. Jiraiya-sensei, are you pitying me? Looking at his former master in front of him, Pain said expressionlessly, you gave us such pity a long time ago. At that time, we cherished this pity so much. But for me now, I don't need it. What really needs pity is this world that makes us cry and shed tears. If you really have pity in your heart, don't give it to me. Give it to the billions of creatures in this world. Saving a person's life is just a good deed, but saving the entire world is true kindness. I'm a person who walked in the world as God. For God, death is just a small toy in his hand. It is not worth being afraid of. Sure enough, as expected by Fukasaku Senin, Pain did not hesitate to refuse the compassion in Jiraiya's heart at this moment. Looking at Pain, who had an indifferent face, but his words were exceptionally firm, Jiraiya's eyes were full of sadness and pain. Listen to the magical prisoner, kill Duju Song Dash. Jiraiya shouted with a strange accent, half playful and half violent voice. The 4 giant toad wisdom kings that surrounded Tian Dao and Rin Jiandao seemed to have received some kind of order as they raised the giant swords in their hands. After a short period of charging, the giant swords stabbed into Tian Dao and Rin Jindao's bodies. The space in the transparent cube was extremely narrow, and there was no chance for Tendo and Munchido to dodge. The 4 long swords directly penetrated the bodies of the 2 Rikudo clones. But even though his body was penetrated, Pain still had a smile on his face, as if he was looking at an ant trying to tear his pants, full of disdain and contempt. In fact, Pain Rikudo was a very special individual existence. After all, the materials used to make Pain Rikudo were corpses that had lost their lives. But these original corpses became individuals bearing the power of Rinnegan under the effect of Rinnegan. These individuals were not like puppets of Puppeteer. On the contrary, they basically retained their original fighting instincts in their original subconscious, but they were completely under the control of Nagato. The spiritual power of Rakudo clones was actually the fusion of Nagato's own spiritual power and the remaining spiritual fragments in the original bodies of these creatures. Although their fall would cause Nagato to suffer a certain backlash to a certain extent, it was just that. Just like now, Tendo Pain's eyes had lost their luster, but the contempt on his face still showed no signs of fading. Jiraiya naturally didn't know this. In Jiraiya's view, he had defeated almost all of Nagato's power, and only Jigakudo was left outside. So Jiraiya dispelled Toad's final chant and prepared to fight the remaining Jigakudo. In this battle, Jiraiya thought that although his strength had declined, he had a good chance to defeat such an existence with the help of the two Toad Sage from Mount Myaboku. Jiraiya ignored the bodies of Tendo and Munchido on the ground and looked around to find the missing Jigakudo. But a piece of snow-white paper fell from the sky. Jiraiya was familiar with such ninjutsu. Jiraiya naturally knew the identity of the person who came in an instant. The emissary of God, one of his former disciples, Conan. Chapter 449. Looking in the direction of the paper, Jiraiya soon saw a familiar figure. The little girl who looked soft and weak at that time had an indescribable beauty at this moment. With a little smile on his face, Jiraiya said to Conan, who had a pair of snow-white wings behind her, "Sure enough, as I said before, Conan, you will definitely become a beautiful girl in the future. It seems that Sensei still has some vision." Jiraiya seemed to instinctively relax after seeing Conan. After all, in Jiraiya's impression, Conan was still the weak little girl who needed protection. Although Jiraiya actually understood that Conan was able to support the entire Akatsuki with Nagato, the originally pure and flawless white paper must have been stained with blood. Conan didn't pay attention to Jiraiya's teasing. Instead, she turned her gaze to the remaining 5 Rakudo doppelgangers on the ground. Of course, she couldn't help but look at Yahiko's pain for a while. Seeing that Conan didn't pay attention to him, Jiraiya didn't get angry. Instead, he followed Conan's gaze and cast his gaze on Tendo Pain, who fell to the ground. "What the hell made you become like this? Since when did all of you, who were originally righteous and kind, decide to treat the lives of countless people as a number?" When facing Pain just now, Jiraiya actually wanted to ask such a question, but Pain's superior attitude made Jiraiya unable to ask such a question. After seeing Conan, Jiraiya asked his question. Maybe Conan can give him an answer? Finally, after hearing Jiraiya's words, Conan finally looked at Jiraiya. There was no strong emotional fluctuation, as if the person in Jiraiya's tone was not her. She said to Jiraiya, "It doesn't matter what happened, and it doesn't matter what we have experienced. Now that we have found the goal of our efforts, we just need to keep working hard." After hearing Conan's words, Jiraiya couldn't help but feel angry in his heart. He said to Conan, "Keep working hard? Working hard to drag the entire ninja world into the flames of war. Then the direction of your efforts is really unexpectedly great. However, without such a powerful force, what means are you going to use to suppress your rebellious subordinates? Although they are indeed very troublesome, as long as there is no strong suppression, then they are not a threat." Conan listened to Jiraiya's slightly sarcastic tone, but she didn't refute at all. Instead, she turned her body into a piece of white paper. Jiraiya himself had entered a slightly weakened state after the battle with Pain Rakudo. On the other hand, Conan was refreshed and in high spirits. Under Conan's full power, Jiraiya didn't react as he should. He could only watch the white paper roll up Tendo, Pain's body on the ground. After rolling up Pain of the Heaven's path, paper quickly turned into the shape of a drill and spiraled towards the sky. Seeing that Conan took away the destroyed Tendo Pain, Jiraiya knew that things were going to get worse. Ignoring the exhaustion on his body, Jiraiya immediately chased after Conan. Shima Sanin and Fukasaku Sanin looked at Jiraiya who was obviously in a bad state, so they immediately persuaded him. Jiraiya boy, what do you want to do? Fukasaku Sanin looked at Jiraiya with a serious face. Don't you know what state you are in now? There's not much chakra left, and your physical strength is almost exhausted. Who can you defeat in this state? Jiraiya looked at Fukasaku Sanin and said to Fukasaku Sanin with an unwilling face, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Pain Rakuto has suffered heavy losses. As long as we continue to work hard, we can make Akatsuki lose an important combat power. As long as we can keep Konin and destroy the remaining Rakuto, it is possible to make Akatsuki fall apart. As long as we can do this, we don't regret our lives. Jiraiya also has a deep hatred for war. Every time a war is launched, how many people will lose their lives, and how many families will experience bone-piercing pain? Obviously, he has grasped the opportunity to stop a war that may sweep the entire ninja world. How can he throw away such an opportunity because he cherishes his life? Stupid. Fukasaku Sanin looked at Jiraiya, and after yelling, he directly jumped high and punched Jiraiya's face. Jiraiya's weak body was directly knocked to the ground by Fukasaku Sanin's angry punch. Jiraiya tried hard to support his body with his arms, but after trying many times, he couldn't stand up at all. You don't regret your life? You don't regret your life. You don't regret your life. Imagine for yourself whether you should cherish your life or not. Whether you are a ninja or a human, the most important thing is to ensure your own safety. It was not only because your life was your greatest treasure, but also because your life was something that was worth treasuring for many people. If you really have the power to fight now, do you think I will stop you? Now, as long as you chase after her, you will lose your life in vain, and it will be meaningless. I don't know how powerful that purple-haired child is, but she has been able to live in a ninja world for so many years, and even become a member of an organization that can stir up the ninja world. Is such a person someone you can fight with your weak body now? When Fukasaku Sanin spoke, he even mobilized some of the remaining Senjutsu chakra in his body, so the roar rushed into Jiraiya's ears like the evening drum and morning bell. Listening to Fukasaku Sanin's words, Jiraiya's mind couldn't help but appear one by one familiar figures. Naruto, Watergate, Shina, 3 generations of Hokage, and even Orochimaru. But the one who appeared the most was the woman he loved for his whole life, crying in front of him. You don't regret your life. How can I say these shameful words? If he really gave up his life so casually, how heartbroken would these people be? Chapter 450. Just when Jiraiya was still immersed in his self-condemnation, a familiar voice came into Jiraiya's ears. Jiraiya-sensei. Jiraiya-sensei. This is Watergate's voice. That was impossible. As the Hokage of Woodleaf Village, Watergate can't leave the village at will. Otherwise, wouldn't he fail his duty? But such a voice was so clear from afar. Jiraiya couldn't believe that Watergate really put aside his duty as Hokage and came to find him. Similarly, Watergate's voice was also heard by Fukasaku Sanin and Shima Sanin. Shima Sanin immediately shouted at the top of her lungs, "Watergate boy, we're here." As if they heard Shima Sanin's voice, the shouts suddenly stopped. Then Jiraiya's eyes blurred, and Watergate's figure appeared beside him. In Watergate's hand was a special 3-pronged kunai. Jiraiya quickly recognized it. This kunai was told by Watergate before he left Woodleaf Village. It seems that during the battle with Pain just now, this kunai was lost somewhere else, right? Watergate's face was full of anxiety at the moment. When he saw Jiraiya, the anxiety turned into an inexplicable anger. Jiraiya-sensei, what are you doing? You just gave me a letter, and you came to fight the leader of Akatsuki alone. What the hell are you thinking? Didn't we already say that no matter what action you take, you have to inform me in advance? When you need me, I can also come to your rescue and act with you. How can you do this? Looking at Watergate, who has always been very calm, showing such an anxious and angry expression, an indescribable feeling emerged from Jiraiya's heart. Jiraiya's originally weak arms. At this moment, he didn't know where the strength came from, but he stood up tremblingly from the state of paralyzed on the ground. Watergate, look at you. Where's the calmness that a Hokage should maintain now? Listening to Jiraiya's words, Watergate's anxious and angry face slowly subsided and was replaced by a helpless smile. I should have thought that once things involve those who have a close relationship with you, you will lose your calm. It's just that I didn't expect you to be so reckless. Fortunately, I came in time. Otherwise, I don't know what unacceptable things will happen. Fukasaku Sannin and Xianxia Sannin nodded when they heard Watergate's words. Jiraiya's stubbornness just now really made them feel helpless. Fortunately, they stopped Jiraiya. Otherwise, Jiraiya's life may really be lost here. But since Watergate has already arrived here, Fukasaku Sannin and Xianxia Sannin also finally put down their worried hearts. After all, as long as Watergate is here, even if Akatsuki responds in time and gathers a large number of ninjas to besiege Jiraiya, they will be safe. Flying Thunder God Jutsu is not only an offensive ninjutsu, but also a powerful weapon to leave the battlefield. Little Watergate, you should persuade your sensei. Just now, this guy was going to risk his life to keep the other party here. Xianxia Sannin glanced at Jiraiya and complained to Watergate without hesitation. Hearing Xianxia Sannin's words, Jiraiya's face turned bitter for a moment. After all, although Watergate seems to be very quiet and calm after sitting in the position of Hokage, he is actually nagging like an old woman. Once he knows that Jiraiya wants to take risks, he will definitely keep nagging. When Jiraiya was a child, he was nagged by the 3 generations. When he grew up, he was nagged by his own apprentice. Thinking of Watergate's nagging ability, Jiraiya couldn't help but have a headache. Fukasaku Sannin and Xianxia Sannin directly turned into 2 clouds of smoke and disappeared. Obviously, they returned to Mount Mayaboku to rest. And Watergate began to talk to Jiraiya in a long way. Those words rushed into Jiraiya's head like a machine gun. Under Watergate's constant preaching, Jiraiya finally couldn't bear it anymore. He stretched out his hand between himself and Watergate and said to Watergate, Okay, Watergate. After all, this is the Rain Country. If we continue to entangle here, maybe the Rain Village will react and send ninjas to encircle us. Although I know you don't care about such a scene, I'm weak now. How about we go back and talk? Hearing Jiraiya's words, Watergate finally restrained the storm in his mouth. Although there was still some blame in his eyes, Watergate, who was worried about Jiraiya's comfort, calmed down and nodded to indicate that Jiraiya's proposal was correct. Just as he was about to use Flying Thunder God Jutsu to quickly leave the Rain Country with Jiraiya, Jiraiya slowly walked to Renkin, who fell to the ground, and pulled out a black chakra condensed iron rod from Renkin's body. Take this, I believe it will be useful. Although he didn't understand why Jiraiya pulled out such a strange iron rod from a corpse, Watergate still nodded and flashed away with Jiraiya. Konan took Pain's body to Jigakudo's side and handed Pain's body to Jigakudo. Konan's side suddenly distorted, and a person with a vortex-shaped mask with only one eye stood beside Konan. Why did you let Jiraiya go? So much information has been leaked in this battle. Isn't it better to leave Jiraiya here? Otherwise, our future plans will definitely be obstructed more. The masked man looked at Konan. Although his face couldn't be seen, his tone was extremely serious, and it seemed to have some anger. Konan watched Jigakudo put Pain's body into the mouth of Pluton Summon. Konan slowly turned back and said to the masked man, Compared to such trivial information, what's so important about the leader of Akatsuki? You should know how important Pain is to Nagato. Chapter 451. For Konan, compared to the so-called Akatsuki's plan and the long-term peace of the shinobi world, Nagato alone is more important. If Nagato and Akatsuki are destined to let Konan choose to abandon them, Konan will definitely choose to abandon Akatsuki without hesitation. This is Konan, a short-sighted woman who only cares about what she values. When a masked man heard that Konan didn't care about Akatsuki's plan and intelligence at all, his only exposed eye, the Scarlet 3-Tomo Sharingan, slowly turned, and a dangerous aura emanated from his body. But this scene only appeared for a short while, and the masked man directly returned to his previous, slightly frivolous state. Anyway, Akatsuki's plan, or the part of the plan that Nagato knows, can't be completely covered up. Such a big move as catching the bijou has already made Akatsuki in the eyes of many people who are still calm. Well, with Pain's strength, there's nothing to hide from such insignificant information. The masked man took a few steps forward and stood beside Conan, tilted his head and looked at Conan's side face and said, "As long as you know that our plan is not allowed to fail, I also hope that you will remember this situation. Remember, in heart." After saying this sentence word by word, the masked man's figure suddenly distorted, but the last sentence rushed into Conan's ears. Since Pain's Six Paths clone has suffered such a trauma, and there is no way to recover his strength in a short time, then I will come forward to stabilize Akatsuki. Xiaonan saw that the masked man's figure had completely disappeared. Her originally cold face also had a beautiful cleavage between her eyebrows because of this sentence. Sure enough, this guy who claims to be Uchiha Madara has become impatient. After so many years of forbearance, he finally can't wait to go to the front of the stage in person. Watergate finally returned to the Wood Leaf Village with Jiraiya. By this time, Minato had already left the village for nearly half a month. As Hokage, Watergate's own work is extremely heavy. There are many things that Watergate's shadow clone and Narashikaku who assisted Watergate can't make decisions, so there are a lot of documents on the desk in Watergate's office that need to be dealt with urgently. But Watergate didn't return to his office to deal with these official business. Instead, he took Jiraiya to Kiba Hospital. After Tsunade returned to Wood Leaf Village, there was almost no special movement. She just did her work as the director of Kiba Hospital and trained medical ninja every day. Watergate was still worried about Jiraiya. After all, although Watergate didn't directly encounter Pain Rakudo, people who have Rinnegan can't be underestimated. In order to prevent Jiraiya from being harmed, Watergate forcibly took Jiraiya to Kiba Hospital to conduct a comprehensive examination. After all, in Kiba Hospital, there could be said to be the number one medical ninja in the ninja world, Tsunade, and his wife, Uzumaki Shinakushina, the orphan of the Uzumaki clan who is proficient in sealing. Such a combination believes that no matter what kind of hidden hand, it will be difficult to hide from such a combination. Watergate, let me go back. Looking at the door of Kiba Hospital, Jiraiya didn't want to go in. He even looked at his disciple with a bit of pleading look and said to Watergate, "I know my own physical condition very well. It's just that I'm a little exhausted. I just need to rest well. There's no need to trouble Tsunade to check for me." Before leaving with Leaf, Jiraiya was already determined to die. It was precisely because of this determination that Jiraiya overcame the thoughts of escape in his heart and had a good chat with Tsunade. The content of the conversation was unknown to others, but Jiraiya himself was clear. Now that the threat of death was eliminated, Jiraiya's heart, which had been born with courage, was beaten back to its original state. Now that Jiraiya saw Tsunade, Jiraiya really felt extraordinarily embarrassed and didn't know what to say. Jiraiya's feelings for Tsunade. In fact, as long as the two of them were close to each other, they probably knew about it, and Jiraiya's avoidance for so many years also made Minato and his wife worried. After all, whether it was in Watergate's view or Shinakushina's view, Jiraiya and Tsunade actually had each other's figure in their hearts. But because of Jiraiya's instinctive retreat and the blow that Tsunade had experienced from her fiancé, Kato Duan, the relationship between the two became particularly complicated. It's a good thing for Tsunade and Jiraiya to take advantage of this opportunity to warm up the feelings between the two people. So, before coming to Kiba Hospital, Watergate quietly contacted his wife and asked Shinakushina to come to Kiba Hospital to cooperate with him. Sure enough, when Jiraiya still wanted to entangle with Watergate, a figure with long red hair came out of the gate of Kiba Hospital. Seeing the figure of her husband, Watergate, Shinakushina cast a tacit look at Watergate and immediately pretended to be curious and surprised and said to Jiraiya, "Jiraiya-sensei, why are you here? Is there anything wrong with your body?" It just so happens that Tsunade-sama is here today. Why don't I take you to see her? After that, she didn't care whether Jiraiya was willing or not. She and Watergate each took Jiraiya's 2 arms and dragged Jiraiya into Kiba Hospital. After the previous battle with pain, Jiraiya directly fell to the ground. Coupled with the long journey day and night during this period, Jiraiya's condition was not so good. Being dragged by Shina, Kushina, and Watergate like this, Jiraiya didn't know whether he really didn't have the strength to resist or just agreed half-heartedly. Jiraiya still entered Kiba Hospital. As the director of Kiba Hospital, Tsunade naturally had her own independent office. Jiraiya was quickly pulled to the door of a room on the top floor of Kiba Hospital. When looking at the words Director's Office, Senju, Tsunade, written on the door of the room, Jiraiya's heart was filled with an indescribable emotion. Chapter 452. Looking at Watergate and Shina Kushina standing beside him, Jiraiya still wanted to leave immediately. But Watergate and Shina Kushina's serious look made Jiraiya dare not move at all. Jiraiya could only stretch out his hand and gently knock on the door of Tsunade's office a few times. Quang, quang, quang. A slightly dull sound was produced with Jiraiya's knocking. After a short silence, a voice came out from the room. "Please come in." Although it was only 2 words, Tsunade's voice was so unique, with a heroic and bold voice that ordinary women don't have. It made Jiraiya feel very familiar. At the same time, an inexplicable emotion was born in his heart. Jiraiya couldn't help but remember the voice and appearance of the person he loved when he wanted to fight with pain. A feeling of fear suddenly appeared in Jiraiya's heart. Fortunately, he didn't chase after her impulsively. Fortunately, he didn't impulsively give up his life because of his inner emotions. Otherwise, would he have a chance to hear such a voice? Thinking about it, even a person like Jiraiya, who has been through a lot, couldn't help but feel a little red in his eyes. Looking at Jiraiya's expression at the moment, Watergate and Shina Kushina knew that they didn't need to force Jiraiya. Jiraiya was ready. After looking at each other, they left quietly. Jiraiya was completely immersed in his emotions at the moment. He didn't notice or didn't care about the departure of Watergate and Shina Kushina. He raised his hand and gently turned the doorknob. With the creaking sound of the wooden door opening, Jiraiya slowly walked into Tsunade's office. At this moment, Tsunade seemed to be dealing with some official business. He didn't know when she put on a pair of gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of her nose. The original heroic spirit and the intellectual aura brought by the glasses combined. A few strands of knotty hair hung down on Tsunade's forehead. The sunlight outside the window seemed to want to add beauty to Tsunade. A few warm and soft rays of light passed through the scattered hair on Tsunade's forehead and sprinkled on Tsunade's face that showed no signs of aging. "Is there any document that you want me to sign? If there is, put it on the table first, and I will..." Tsunade didn't look up when she heard someone come in, because Tsunade was checking the latest plan of the Wood Leaf Medical Ninja Training Program, so she was particularly focused. But after seeing that the person who came in didn't speak, Tsunade raised her head with a little doubt and looked in the direction of her office door. Jiraiya's white-haired appearance and slightly weathered face were reflected in Tsunade's eyes. Jiraiya naturally also noticed Tsunade's dull look at the moment. Sure enough, Tsunade is also worried about me. Jiraiya instantly felt that his heart was filled with something. The feeling was warm and heavy, but such a thing was not a burden for him at all. Instead, it was more comfortable, like wearing a warm, cotton-padded jacket in the cold winter. Especially when Jiraiya saw Tsunade slowly taking off the glasses on the bridge of her nose and walking step by step to his side. Jiraiya even wanted to open his hands and hug Tsunade, who was walking towards him. He wanted to let Tsunade know that he missed her as much as she missed him. Seeing Tsunade getting closer and closer to him, Jiraiya gradually became bolder. He slowly closed his eyes, opened his arms, and wanted to welcome Tsunade back into his arms like a swallow returning to its nest. But everything didn't turn out as Jiraiya imagined. Jiraiya got a heavy punch to his cheek after he got it. Obviously, Tsunade's punch was filled with hatred, and she had used a lot of her own strange strength skills. Jiraiya's figure was directly hit the wall of Tsunade's office. The entire Kiba hospital could hear the loud sound of Jiraiya's close contact with the wall. Shizen, who had been following Tsunade, and all kinds of people working in Kiba Hospital were completely unresponsive after hearing such a sound. It seemed that this kind of thing had happened more than once. Previously, Tsunade used her strange strength to throw her desk directly through 7 walls. Shizen immediately contacted the department specializing in weapons in Woodleaf Village to fully reinforce the walls of Tsunade's office. A lot of special, flexible, and strong materials were added to the walls of Tsunade's office. Shizen raised her head and looked in the direction of Tsunade's office, and said with a little melancholy, "It seems that Tsunade-sama's desk is going to be changed again today. It's only been a few days, and it's going to make our Kiba hospital's budget tight. Changing the desk can make the financial budget of the entire hospital tight." If such a thing was heard by people who didn't know the inside story, they would think that Shizen was joking. However, some medical staff of Kiba Hospital who passed by Shizen didn't dare to speak after hearing her words, but the look of approval in their eyes was so obvious. At this moment, Jiraiya was deeply hit in the wall, and it was exactly the same as the saying, "You can't take it out." Because of the special construction material, Jiraiya was now directly embedded in the wall, and there was no sense of disharmony at all. Because of the huge force, Jiraiya's body stopped breathing for a short time. After a while, Jiraiya suddenly regained consciousness and began to gasp for breath. Jiraiya, who felt that he had adjusted his state, raised his head with difficulty, looked at Tsunade opposite him, and said, "Tsunade, you are..." Halfway through his words, Jiraiya couldn't go on. Because standing opposite him, Tsunade's eyes were red at the moment, looking at him with 3 parts anger and 7 parts sadness. Those red and swollen eyes directly blocked all the words Jiraiya wanted to say. "You still know that you want to come back. You left on your own, and you fought with your life on your own. Do you think you are still the arrogant kid from decades ago? Do you think you are still the lonely boy who no one cared about? Do you think... For decades, I wanted to find you every day, but because of the guilt in my heart, I couldn't summon up the courage to face you. It wasn't until I received the commission from Yuan Fei Sensei and Watergate that I had the courage to look for you, who I knew very clearly, but didn't dare to approach. I thought that with your character, it wouldn't be easy for you to return to this place full of sad memories. But I didn't expect you to really come back. Do you know how happy I was at that time? The day you promised me to come back was the happiest day in my life." Jiraiya gently let go of Tsunade, who was tightly hugged in his arms, and pressed his hands on Tsunade's shoulders. His eyes looked at the person opposite him affectionately, and said seriously, "In the blink of an eye, we're no longer the young people of the past. Although the years have unknowingly painted our hair and painted our faces, it also made me more aware of my feelings. Tsunade, are you willing to be the one to walk with me to the end?" Looking at Jiraiya opposite her, Tsunade's heart was also constantly fluctuating. With a naughty look, Tsunade said to Jiraiya, I don't want to. These 4 words were like a bomb thrown into his heart. He summoned up the courage to confess, but was rejected as soon as he opened his mouth. Looking at Jiraiya's dazed look, Tsunade seemed to have returned to the time when she was 16 or 17 years old. She stretched out her hand with a bit of naughtiness and patted Jiraiya's head opposite her, and said to Jiraiya with a little reproach, "You idiot, don't you know how to look at the atmosphere? This is my office. If you want to confess, shouldn't you find a more suitable time and a more suitable way? After so many years, you still haven't grown up at all. You don't understand a woman's mind at all." Tsunade's words directly turned Jiraiya into a dumbfounded goose. It seemed that he didn't understand what Tsunade meant for a while. He looked at Tsunade in a daze, just like when he was a teenager. But then Jiraiya seemed to understand Tsunade's meaning. That kind of joy directly filled Jiraiya's heart. Even if an elephant was raging in his heart, it would be difficult to describe that kind of agitated feeling. At this moment, if he wasn't in front of Tsunade, Jiraiya felt that he would jump up directly. Letting go of Tsunade, Jiraiya said to Tsunade with a little excitement, You're right. I'm in a hurry. I have to prepare well. This kind of thing really needs to be prepared well. I can't be so anxious. I'll go and prepare right now." After that, without waiting for Tsunade's reply, Jiraiya rushed towards the door excitedly. Faintly, Tsunade seemed to hear Jiraiya's excited shout. Tsunade stretched out her arms and hugged herself again. She slowly raised her head and looked at the ceiling of her office. Break. Perhaps this is the ending you were hoping for, right? Chapter 454. Mia, did you know? It seems that Tsunade-sama is going to marry Jiraiya-sama. In Nangong's house, Nangong, Ro, Mashiro, and Little Linger were sitting around the table eating lunch. Mashiro suddenly seemed to remember the news he heard when chatting with Xianxia before. I said to Nangong. Hearing this news, Nangong didn't say anything, but Nangong Ro seemed to have heard something miraculous and said to Mashiro in disbelief, "Are you serious? I heard that uncle named Jiraiya is a super lecherous guy. Many times he was found peeping at women's bathhouses next to some of the baths in Woodleaf Village. Such a guy can actually be liked by a great beauty like Tsunade-sama." Nangong Ro naturally knew about Jiraiya and Tsunade, and most of the news she heard about Jiraiya was not very pleasant to hear. Because Nangong's family and Xianxia have a good relationship, they can occasionally meet Tsunade when they visit each other. Speaking of the mature-looking and voluptuous Tsunade, Nangong Ro couldn't help but look down at her chest. She looked at Little Linger, who was a few years younger than her, and Mashiro, who was a few years older than her. Her chest was really inexplicable. For Little Linger and Nangong Ro, who were not very clear about the relationship between Jiraiya and Tsunade, Nangong explained to the two girls. Both Jiraiya-sama and Tsunade-sama are strong people who have been famous in Woodleaf Village for a long time. From the Second Shinobi World War to the Third Shinobi World War, the two of them were active together as teammates. After surviving under the hands of Hanzo the Salamander, who was known as the demigod in Amage Cure, they got the name Sannin. It's just that they rarely fight in these years, so they're not so famous for some of the younger generation in the shinobi world. The two of them have also experienced all kinds of things. To be able to reach this point, it can be said that they finally got married. When Nangong said the words "finally got married," Mashiro's eyes flashed with an inexplicable look. It's really enviable. Two people who like each other got married in the end. Zhenbai quietly raised her head and looked at Nangong. Her eyes seemed to be filled with anticipation. Mashiro's gaze was so undisguised that Nangong naturally noticed it. But Nangong still pretended not to notice Mashiro's gaze. He just talked to Little Linger and Nangong Ro about some things he knew about Jiraiya and Tsunade. Shaking his head gently with a helpless smile on his face, Mashiro retracted his gaze. It seems that all good things are destined to go through ups and downs. Mashiro's performance was naturally seen by Nangong Ro. Unlike Little Linger's ignorance, Nangong Ro can be considered to understand such things as men and women. But when she saw that her brother didn't respond to Mashiro's gaze, Nangong Ro didn't have any thoughts of enlightening her brother at all. Instead, there was a faint feeling of relaxation in her heart. This feeling of relaxation was like protecting something precious to her. It was so thick and full of guilt. In that case, why don't we go visit them later? After all, we were also taken care of by Jiraiya and Watergate-sama in Woodleaf. Such a big event should be congratulated. Mashiro looked at Nangong and made such a proposal. For Nangong didn't like to deal with too many people. He just felt that as long as he lived his own life, it was fine. But his stable life in Woodleaf was also somewhat related to Namikaze, Watergate, and Jiraiya. It wouldn't be rude to visit them. Since you feel like visiting, then let's go and have a look later. Soon, Nangong finalized the matter of visiting. There was nothing to do at home during this time. Since he knew about this matter, he might as well visit them on the same day. Since he was going to visit, he naturally couldn't go empty-handed. Therefore, Nangong walked into his room and looked around his bookshelf. He took out a scroll and a booklet with only a white cover without any words written on it, and held them in his hands. Taking the scroll and booklet into the living room, Mashiro also instantly saw the things in Nangong's hands. Usually, it was Mashiro who helped Nangong tidy up his room. He naturally knew what was in Nangong's room. The scroll in Nangong's hand was some secret prescription of the Bloodcloth Pavilion's Aoki altar. It seemed to be for Tsunade. After all, Tsunade, as a medical ninja, should be quite interested in such things. But when Mashiro saw the white cover booklet in Nangong's hand, the tip of Mashiro's ears slightly turned red. With a little strange smile, Mashiro looked at Nangong and said, "Is this booklet what you are going to give to Jiraiya-sama? You really have some inexplicable bad intentions." Hearing Mashiro's words, Nangong's face couldn't help but have a mischievous smile. "How can you say that? This is a really good thing. Jiraiya-sama is already so old, it's good to know about it. Otherwise, won't you be kicked out of bed by Tsunade-sama every day?" Putting the scroll and booklet into his arms at the same time, Nangong walked together with Mashiro, Nangong-ro, and Little Linger towards Jiraiya's residence. Woodleaf Village was not big, but it wasn't small either. In addition, Nangong's family wasn't in a hurry, so it took them a full hour to arrive at Jiraiya's door. Nangong took a few steps forward and knocked on Jiraiya's door. After a while, Jiraiya's hurried response came from the room. As a member of Woodleaf Sanin, Jiraiya's residence wasn't very luxurious. It could even be said to be a bit simple. It was just the most common 2 rooms and 1 living room. At this moment, such a slightly narrow room was filled with all kinds of wrapped gifts. Smelling the smell in Jiraiya's room, Nangong was a little curious. After all, Nangong has been to Jiraiya's house several times. The level of dirty and messy in Jiraiya's house can be said to be through the sky. But now, there isn't even a smell, and all kinds of things are placed in order. Sure enough, when a man has or is about to have a family, there will be such a big change. Chapter 455. Congratulations, Jiraiya-sama. Nangong cupped his hands and congratulated Jiraiya with a smile. Seeing Nangong congratulating Jiraiya, Little Linger, Nangong-ro, and Mashiro behind Nangong also congratulated Jiraiya one after another. Looking at the gifts piled up in Jiraiya's room, he knew that a lot of people must have come over to do the same thing as Nangong's family. After all, this wedding can be said to be the most important wedding in Woodleaf in the past few years. After all, the bride and groom of the wedding are important figures in Woodleaf. After all, one is the current Hokage's master, the legendary ninja of Woodleaf, Jiraiya. The other is the princess of Woodleaf's founding family, Senju clan, and the director of Kiba Hospital, Tsunade Senju. Whether it's the family forces or the Hokage's forces, they have to regard this as the most important thing. Precious gifts were taken out from their family's treasury and sent to Jiraiya and Tsunade's house. Looking at the situation in Jiraiya's house, Nangong and Tsunade probably have a higher status than Jiraiya, and they are the flag of Konoha's family. What kind of scene is it in Tsunade's house? After listening to the congratulations of Nangong's family, Jiraiya quickly invited Nangong and the other 3 to his room. Jiraiya skillfully took out some snacks and tea for guests from the kitchen, and finally casually sat in front of his small table on the tatami mat. Jiraiya stretched out his hand and rubbed his slightly stiff face because of receiving all kinds of guests in the past few days and constantly maintaining a smile on his face. He said to Nangong and Little Linger with a bit of relaxation, "You can do whatever you want, whatever is comfortable. I'm really tired these 2 days. I don't know when the news spread, but since a few days ago, people I don't know have been visiting me with a lot of gifts. You know me, I don't usually like to entertain people, and I don't even have tea at home. And then in order to maintain my face, these tea are also from Tsunade and Watergate. When the people from the major families came to visit, they would make all kinds of strange etiquette like machines. Although I don't know how to respond to these etiquettes, at the very least, I still have to smile apologetically. I finally understand why the smile on Watergate's face has become less and less since he became the Hokage. It's a gift to receive people every day with a smile on his face. Every day. After cracking a joke that was neither too big nor too small, the three girls who came with Nangongja gradually lost their cautious looks. Instead, they relaxed a little. After all, before coming, Nangongja told Nangongro and Little Linger about how special Jiraiya's identity was. Perhaps Jiraiya was too reserved after seeing Nangongro and Little Linger enter his house, so he used his disciple as a tool to adjust the atmosphere to make Nangongro and Little Linger relax. Nangongro was like a little monkey. After she relaxed a little, she couldn't suppress the curiosity in her heart. She said to Jiraiya with some curiosity, "Lecherous uncle, how did you trick Tsunade-sama? Obviously, Tsunade-sama is a super beautiful woman, and you look like you're 60 or 70 years old." Nangongro just opened her mouth, and the word lecherous uncle directly hit Jiraiya. Do I look like a lecherous uncle? I've always been a romantic, but not vulgar person, a flower in the turbid waves, ah? Little girl, you're wrong to say that. How can you think of my unrivaled charm as some sinister and despicable means? I tell you, the reason why I can go to the last step with Tsunade is because Jiraiya and Watergate were indeed master and disciple. When Jiraiya complained about Watergate's chatterbox attribute again and again, he didn't realize that he was actually almost the same as Watergate. After Nangongro opened a topic for Jiraiya, Jiraiya's mouth began to constantly talk about all kinds of self-praising things he thought were good and so on. And Nangongja saw his sister and Jiraiya chatting so happily and occasionally inserted a few words to liven up the atmosphere. The afternoon was almost spent in Jiraiya's house, and it can be regarded as a different kind of guest and host. Before leaving, Nangongja watched his three little girls walk out of the door of Jiraiya's house. He took out a scroll and a white booklet from his arms and put it in Jiraiya's hand. Seeing what Nangongja took out, Jiraiya looked at Nangongja with a little doubt and asked, "What are you doing?" Nangongja smiled and said to Jiraiya, "Nothing, it's just a small gift. I think it may be helpful to you and Tsunade-sama. So I took it." Jiraiya quickly put the booklet and scroll handed over by Nangongja back behind Nangongja, stretched out his hand, and pointed to the large and small gifts in his room, and said to Nangongja, "Although we're not that close, we're at least friends, right? So we don't need to use this method to maintain our relationship. It's just a kind of slander to our relationship." Nangongja smiled and said to Jiraiya, "I'm different from those people. I won't give you something that's flashy but useless. This scroll contains some secret prescriptions. I believe Tsunade-sama will be very interested in it, so I'll give it to you here, and you can pass it to Tsunade-sama." Putting the scroll in his hand into Jiraiya's hand, Nangongja secretly opened a corner of another booklet with a white cover for Jiraiya, revealing some sentences written on the title page, indicating that Jiraiya should read it himself. After all, Jiraiya-sama is old, and there are many times when he may be powerless. So, this book contains the royal family's secret imperial. Before Nangongja could finish, Jiraiya covered his mouth with his hand. Jiraiya hurriedly put the white booklet into his arms, as if he was afraid that someone would take it away. Looking at Jiraiya's expression, Nangongja's face showed a wicked smile. Chapter 456. Because of Jiraiya and Tsunade's sudden and long-awaited wedding news, the entire Woodleaf village was boiling. This is the union of two top powers in Woodleaf, and it is also an important opportunity for Naruto clan's forces and family forces in Woodleaf to ease the tense atmosphere. For the villagers of Woodleaf, such an atmosphere naturally makes people feel that Woodleaf Village is full of hope. It can be said that even the sun seems to be extraordinarily warm. But the world can't be full of places where the sun can shine, and more places are still shrouded in various haze. After leaving Nangongja's side, Sasuke did not immediately look for his brother, Itachi Uchiha. Sasuke's heart was very clear about how dangerous Itachi Uchiha's Akatsuki organization was. Orochimaru, who had been a boundless haze on Sasuke's head, actually escaped from Akatsuki with his tail between his legs. How can he help his brother realize his plan with his weak strength alone? So Sasuke returned to some of Orochimaru's secret bases took 3 people he thought could help him, and formed his own team, Snake. Sasuke took such a name not only because he wanted to firmly remember what he relied on to save his life in Orochimaru's hands, but also because his team was gathered together because of Orochimaru. Although Sasuke said that he had no feelings for Orochimaru, Orochimaru did have a very profound impact on Sasuke. Not long ago, Sasuke took his teammates Onizuki Mizuki, Red Lotus, and Libra Yugo to intercept Deidara in a new combination named Hoodlum according to his own information. With the cooperation of the 3 Snake team members, Hashizuki Mizuki, Red Lotus, and Yugo Libra, Sasuke and his Snake team successfully defeated the combination of Deidara and Hoodlum despite paying a certain loss. Under Hoodlum's half-deliberate disclosure, Sasuke also knew where his brother was. Originally, Sasuke also planned to capture Hoodlum directly to get more information from his mouth, but under Deidara's crazy self-explosion attack, Sasuke could only summon Manda's Snake and use Sharingan to control the disobedient Manda's Snake, making him a meat shield for himself and the team. When the explosion was over, Hoodlum's figure was long gone. With the mentality of giving it a try, Sasuke walked towards the location Hoodlum deliberately revealed. Sasuke, who didn't expect to see his brother so smoothly, was surprised to find that Hoodlum didn't deceive him at all. His brother, Itachi Uchiha, was sitting in a chair that looked relatively intact in the ruins. "Sasuke, are you here?" His eyes were closed, but when Sasuke just stepped into the ruins, Uchiha Itachi's voice came into Sasuke's ears. Although Itachi tried his best to hide the weakness in his voice, Sasuke knew his brother too well. That kind of tiredness from the body to the soul may not be easily noticed by others, but as Itachi's family, Sasuke was clear. Itachi's eyes opened gently, as if to see Sasuke clearly, and his eyelids tightened. Itachi thought he would see hatred and madness on Sasuke's face, but on Sasuke's cold face, Itachi could clearly see a trace of hidden pity. Pity? It seems that Sasuke is not as ignorant as he thought over the years. Since Akatsuki officially began to capture Bijou, Itachi obviously felt that he was more and more guarded, so gradually, the contact between himself and Nangonja became less frequent. As long as it wasn't an important matter involving life and death, Itachi didn't notify him at his request. Nangonja also thought for a long time whether to inform Itachi about Sasuke knowing the truth, but such a secret letter may not only involve Sasuke knowing the secret, but also the sensitive matter of Uchiha Fugaku and his wife not dying. This matter can't be disclosed to Akatsuki in any case, so Nangonja chose not to inform Itachi Uchiha after thinking about it several times. But Itachi Uchiha, after all, was a meticulous person. When he found that Sasuke's state was not right, Itachi also reacted very alertly, blocking Sasuke's words that had already opened his mouth and was about to say, "My stupid brother, since you have already found this place, do you already feel that you are strong enough to challenge me?" Itachi looked at Sasuke and slowly stood up from where he was sitting. His half-closed eyes were now fully open, and a pair of 3 Tomo Sharingan slowly turned into the shape of a triangular pinwheel. "Let me see if you have really grown into what I expect." Tsukuyami. The Jinjutsu brought by Itachi's Manjikyu Sharingan was cast, and Sasuke's spirit was instantly pulled into Tsukuyami's world. Instead of being hung on a black cross like before, he stood on the ground mixed with blood and black under the moonlight in the shape of Sharingan. Looking at Sasuke, Itachi asked Sasuke, "From the looks of it, you should have already met father and mother and know everything, right?" Sasuke no longer hid his face, and drops of tears were born in Sasuke's eyes. Without speaking, Sasuke threw himself directly into his brother's arms. Although it was Tsukuyami's world, Sasuke still felt the warmth emanating from his brother's body. Caught off guard by Sasuke's hug, Itachi couldn't react in time. He slowly pressed his hand on Sasuke's head, who was hugging him, and gently touched it a few times. Unknowingly, the child who could barely reach his chest was now almost as tall as him. But although it has been so long, Sasuke is still so attached to his child. For so many years, Itachi, who had been blocking his heart and showing a cold expression in front of Sasuke, slowly melted the frost on his face at this moment. The two didn't know what to say to each other. They just clumsily enjoyed each other's warmth that had been separated for several years. Chapter 457. Oni-san, I want to help you. For so many years, you have faced a threat from Akatsuki and would leave alone. I don't know the specific situation, but I know very well that you must have had a hard time over the years. So I'm here. Let me help you, okay? Feeling Itachi's body temperature. Although he was still very attached to this feeling, Sasuke forced himself to break free from such warmth. When Sasuke learned about Itachi, Sasuke had already decided to help Itachi, and such a decision would never be easily changed. Hearing Sasuke's words, Itachi's eyes were inevitably moved. Has his brother grown into a person who can help him? But Itachi didn't immediately agree to Sasuke's request, because Itachi was very clear about how deep the darkness he faced was. The dark world in front of him was like a bottomless abyss. As long as he dared to poke his head out a little, he may be pulled in by the claws and teeth extended from the abyss. Itachi didn't want his brother to experience such a life of treading on thin ice. It's too late, Sasuke. Looking at the blurred Sasuke in front of him, Itachi said to Sasuke, "You should know by now, right? Uchiha clan's Kekkei Genkai Sharingan is not the end of the 3 Tomo Sharingan. Even a Manjikyu Sharingan I have now is only an incomplete existence. It is precisely because it is incomplete that I have to pay a price every time I use it. Over the years, for various reasons, I have used my Manjikyu Sharingan a lot, and now my eyes can hardly see anything. The exhaustion of my power has also caused my body to be riddled with holes. I don't have long to live." With that said, Itachi even covered his mouth and coughed violently. His originally pale face became even more unsightly at this moment. Sasuke heard Itachi's words and immediately said to Itachi, "Oni-san, I'll take you out of here. Look at Nangon-sensei. Let's go to Tsunade-sama. Let's go to the famous or hidden doctors in the ninja world. As long as I can cure you, no matter what it is, I can do it." She had just met her brother, and she had so many things to tell her brother, but her brother directly told her that he would not live for long. No matter from which perspective, Sasuke felt that he couldn't accept such a fact at all. Seeing that Sasuke didn't listen to him at all, Itachi could only shake his head. If he really had a chance to live, how could he not look for it? After all, this was a world where his younger brother and his parents existed. But it's impossible. It's impossible. Sasuke gently waved his hand and removed Tsukuyami's space. Sasuke and Itachi returned to the real world. Looking at Itachi, who looked weaker in front of him, Sasuke's eyes were full of unbearable madness. I don't. I must save you. I must save you. I to save you. Sasuke to save Sasuke, looking at Sasuke's appearance. Itachi's face reappeared with a slightly stiff but very gentle smile that has been missing for many years. Just let me help you for the last time. My dear brother. Finally, Itachi no longer called Sasuke stupid brother, but dear brother that Sasuke missed for a long time. Sasuke's face instantly froze, no longer with anger, no longer with madness, no longer with pity. All emotions were replaced by dullness. Itachi looked at Sasuke, completely ignoring that his eyes had begun to bleed, and he still urged the power of his Manjikyu Sharingan. Holding Yada no Kagami in his left hand and Tatsuka sword in his right hand, Itachi used Susanu's ultimate Susanoo. Itachi's body was wrapped by Susanoo and instantly rose a lot from the ground. Controlling Susanoo to raise the Tatsuka sword in his hand high, Itachi said to Sasuke, "Although you succeeded in making Orochimaru's reincarnation jutsu fail, you didn't completely eliminate Orochimaru's influence on you. You still have Orochimaru's aura. Once the time is right, Orochimaru may reoccupy your body. So, this will be the last time I help you, my dear brother. In the future, you must be more careful, because your life will not only be your life, but also someone else will live because of you." Although Itachi didn't say it clearly, Sasuke knew that Itachi entrusted his parents' lives in his hands. hoping that he could take good care of them. Sasuke wanted to open his mouth and agree to his brother's last request, but his throat seemed to be blocked, and he couldn't spit out anything. He could only let a few unknown sobs and drops of tears flow from Sasuke's eyes. Maybe this is the only way to let Sasuke vent the sadness and heartache in his chest. Goodbye, my brother. Goodbye, my parents. Goodbye, Woodleaf, where I grew up. Goodbye, this ninja world that made me suffer, made me love and hate. The moment Totsuka's sword was waved, the whole world seemed to have been silent for Sasuke and Itachi. Without physical pain and pressure, Sasuke and Itachi hugged each other tightly, just like before in Tsukuyomi space. A huge sword blade, whether real or illusory, passed through Sasuke's body, and a vague white phantom was pulled out of Sasuke's body. Under the guidance of Totsuka's sword, it was stuffed into the wine gourd at Susanu's waist and sealed. Itachi looked at Sasuke, who fell to the ground with a gratified smile on his face. Fortunately, at least in the end, I can finally show my feelings in front of my brother. But I'm really cunning. She clearly knew that the days ahead would only be more difficult, but she still abandoned her younger brother and went to the Pure Land that stood aloof from worldly affairs. Just think of this as my last little selfishness, right? Chapter 458. When Totsuka's sword took away the remaining power of Orochimaru in Sasuke's body, Itachi looked at Sasuke standing in front of him, and finally closed his eyes slowly. Although there were still tears of blood on his cheeks, due to overuse of Sharingan, Itachi's expression at this moment was extraordinarily peaceful. It was like the heavy burden that he had been carrying for several years was lifted at this moment, and the sense of relaxation from the soul filled Itachi's face. Without the supply of power, Itachi's Susanoo also slowly dissipated. Wisps of chakra flame drifted out from Susanoo's body, and Itachi's originally high body also lost its power and began to slowly fall. Watching Itachi fall from midair, Sasuke hurried forward a few steps to catch Itachi's body. Spreading his arms, he hugged his brother, who he had been relying on since childhood, in his arms. Feeling his brother's body temperature passing a little bit, the three Tomo in Sasuke's eyes turned faster and faster. From childhood to adulthood, it was his brother who protected him. Later, there was the bloody night of the Uchiha clan. Sasuke once thought that all the things he could rely on disappeared without a trace, and from then on, he could only rely on himself. But after knowing the truth, Sasuke found that he was still protected by his brother. After eliminating Orochimaru and forming the Snake Squad, Sasuke just hoped that he could no longer rely on Itachi's protection as a child. Sasuke hoped that he could help his brother with something. However, she had clearly just seen her brother whom she had not seen for a long time. She had clearly just hugged her brother in her arms. Clearly, she still had countless words that she wanted to tell her brother in her heart. However, her brother had left her just like that, preventing her from saying those words. In the end, am I still the child protected by my brother? No. I can't do this. I'm absolutely not willing to accept such an ending. I want to save my brother's life. There are so many magical ninjutsu and medical skills in this world. As long as I can find the right way, I will be able to resurrect my brother. He had to say everything that he wanted to say. Thinking of this, Sasuke grabbed his brother's hand and shook it hard. It seemed that he was determined to pull his brother back from the underworld. His eyes were full of determination. The masked man hoodlum's figure appeared not far from Sasuke. The only Sharingan under the mask was staring at Sasuke's eyes. Obviously, the rotation speed of the three Tomo had reached the extreme, but there was still no sign of connecting. It seemed that Sasuke himself was resisting accepting his brother's death. This is really troublesome. The masked man hoodlum took a few steps forward, wanting to go to Sasuke's side. But before he moved, Sasuke seemed to have noticed Hoodlum's existence. A pair of high-speed Sharingan stared at Hoodlum, who was wearing the Akatsuki uniform with black background and red clouds. What an amazing intuition. Hoodlum's heart was slightly surprised by Sasuke's intuition. After all, he was very confident that with his ability, Even if it was a ninja like Watergate, as long as he didn't actively expose his aura, he wouldn't be discovered. But Sasuke was able to directly detect his presence. This wasn't something that a ninja's perception ability could do. Sasuke also quietly concealed his inner surprise, a pair of eyes staring at Hoodlum's figure. He could clearly see this person standing there, but he couldn't sense his aura at all. If it wasn't for the fact that he had cultivated the sword light and had an inexplicable premonition of danger, he probably wouldn't have been able to discover this person's existence. And the most important thing was this person's eyes. Although Hoodlum deliberately concealed his eyes, just the outline of the music was enough to see that Hoodlum's eyes weren't the 3-Tomo Sharingan state he saw last time, but the shape of Manjikyu Sharingan that had undergone a certain shape change. In the previous battle with Deidara, Sasuke also saw Hoodlum, but at that time, Hoodlum almost didn't use any special abilities and didn't show such a strange state of changing his aura into nothingness in Manjikyu Sharingan. You again? Slowly putting Itachi's body and his arms on the ground, Sasuke took out a signal flare from his arms and fired it into the sky. At the same time, he slowly unsheathed the silver-white long sword behind his waist and held it in his hand, looking at the nihility in front of him with vigilance. You don't need to summon your teammates to guard your brother's body. After all, for me, Itachi Uchiha's Manjikyu Sharingan is useless. The masked man Hoodlum was telling the truth, because Manjikyu Sharingan itself can only be transplanted between close relatives and then evolve into eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. And Hoodlum wasn't willing to give up his Manjikyu Sharingan with space ability, so Itachi's body was really useless to Hoodlum. I came here to help you, so that you can truly inherit the legacy your brother left for you, so that you can have a real Sharingan. When Hoodlum spoke, he also used a certain Jinjutsu technique, so there was an inexplicable sense of bewitchment in his tone. But no matter what kind of Jinjutsu it was just a small trick for Sharingan. Looking at Hoodlum, standing opposite him with a little contempt, Sasuke's eyes unconsciously had an indelible killing intent. I don't want to listen to such superfluous words, and I don't need to listen to them. Since you're so secretive, it proves that you're not a good person. For someone like you who obviously has other thoughts, you can't get my trust. Just as Sasuke finished this sentence, the 3 members of the Snake Squad, Hanrin, Mizuki, and Libra Yugo also appear beside Sasuke. When Shueisha, who was originally somewhat frivolous, saw Hoodlum's Red Cloud organization uniform, the smile on his face disappeared. Hey, Sasuke, don't tell me we're going to fight Akatsuki again. Glancing at Hoodlum, standing opposite him, Mizuki continued, although this guy looked like a coward last time, now it seems that he's not that simple. Chapter 459. When Red Lotus saw Hoodlum, she sensed that something was wrong with him, but her fighting spirit didn't diminish at all. Red crystals that looked like powder wrapped around Red Lotus' hands. No matter what happened, since he's standing on the opposite side of us, we'll just have to fight to the death. Shueisha, you are too cowardly. Although Red Lotus was a woman, she was very fond of fighting. Seeing Shueisha's timid and petty appearance, Red Lotus ridiculed her. Beside Red Lotus, Yugo, who was wearing brown linen clothes, looked at Shueisha. Although he didn't say anything, black runes slowly covered Yugo's body. Obviously, he was ready to fight. Shueisha seemed to be very unconvinced. He gritted his teeth and looked at Hong Lian and Jiwoo. He said to them with a bit of displeasure, "Don't be so arrogant. Are the two of you so stupid that you didn't notice that this guy is completely different from before? That kind of dangerous aura can be said to be overwhelming. In such a situation, you still want to fight with such a person who is hiding who knows how many trump cards?" After saying this, Suigetsu also looked at Sasuke, seemingly hoping that Sasuke, who had always been very calm, could say something to stop these two people's impulsive actions. However, Sasuke not only didn't open his mouth to persuade Red Lotus and Yugo to retreat, but instead he took a step forward with his long sword, and the battle chi on his body soared into the sky. Suigetsu looked at Sasuke's appearance and naturally knew that Sasuke had no intention of backing down. He could only press his head helplessly and said to his 3 teammates who had already lost their heads, "What do you want me to do? If you guys die, don't blame me for abandoning you guys and running away alone." Although he said that he could escape at any time, Suigetsu took out the Zanpakuto on his back and pointed the sharp Zanpakuto in the direction of Hoodlum. His fighting spirit didn't lose to his teammates, Sasuke, Red Lotus, and Yugo. Looking at the state of the 4 people on Sasuke's side, Hoodlum seemed to be very impatient and shouted, "It's really troublesome. I'm not interested in fighting with you guys. Does no one believe the truth these days?" After saying that, Hoodlum took out a scroll that looked very old. On the cover of the scroll, there was a pattern of 3 Tomo Sharingan, and on the shaft of the scroll, there was a pattern of a round fan representing the Uchiha clan. Hoodlum casually threw the scroll at Sasuke's feet and continued to speak to Sasuke. "I can't help it if you don't believe me now, but I can assure you that I don't have any bad intentions. All I want is for you to live up to Itachi's last request. This scroll contains everything you need to know and how to find me. Once you've made up your mind, come and find me." After saying this, Hoodlum's figure was sucked into a vortex, leaving no trace behind. Obviously, Hoodlum had left, but Sasuke still didn't relax. Until Hoodlum's figure disappeared for 3 minutes. Sasuke inserted the silver sword in his hand into the ground to support his body. Sasuke's face instantly became pale, as if he had consumed a lot of energy. Just now, when Itachi swept Sasuke's body with Totsuka's sword, although he successfully took away Orochimaru's fragments lurking in Sasuke's body, Orochimaru's residual power and Susanu's Totsuka sword went through a fierce battle in Sasuke's body. Sasuke's physical strength and chakra were greatly consumed. When he saw Hoodlum just now, Sasuke also forced himself not to show his weakness in front of Hoodlum. "Sasuke, are you okay?" Seeing Sasuke's obviously abnormal face, Yugo walked to Sasuke's side and stretched out his hand to support Sasuke. Sasuke's snake team is actually not that cohesive. Among the 3, the most loyal to Sasuke is actually Yugo, who has always been silent and dull. Feeling the powerlessness in his body, Sasuke slowly shook his head and murmured softly in his mouth, "I'm sorry. I didn't want to use the power of Nangong-sensei, but it seems that I have to use the power of Nangong-sensei." Looking up, Sasuke said to Yugo, "Yugo, there's a red jade pendant in my ninja tool bag. Take it out and crush it." Although Yugo didn't understand why Sasuke asked him to do this, he still obeyed Sasuke's words and took out a jade pendant that looked as red as blood from Sasuke's ninja tool bag. He carved a long sword on the jade pendant, as well as a blood flower pattern. Yugo didn't carefully observe how beautiful this jade pendant, which seemed to be made of a special material, was, but he directly crushed the jade pendant. The jade pendant fragments seemed to emit an imperceptible energy fluctuation, and then Sasuke said to Red Lotus and Suigetsu, "Let's take a break here." Red Lotus and Suigetsu nodded and formed a triangular battle formation with Yugo to protect Sasuke. Not long after, Red Lotus's eyebrows were slightly wrinkled together, because in Red Lotus's perception, there were more than a dozen people with unknown auras rushing quickly towards the direction of the 4 of them. Red Lotus began to mobilize chakra in his body, and he was obviously ready to fight. But Sasuke pressed down Red Lotus's hands that were already on his chest to form a seal and shook his head gently at Red Lotus. After a while, the auras that Red Lotus perceived had already reached Sasuke and others. After seeing the red jade pendant fragment in Yugo's hand, the Blood Cloak Pavilion disciples, who were wearing various costumes representing the 5 elements, also half-knelt on the ground and shouted very respectfully. A total of 17 disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion Raging Altar, Aoki Altar, Aquamarine Altar, Scarlet Flame Altar, and Thick Earth Altar have come to pay their respects. The blood-colored jade pendant that Sasuke asked Yugo to crush just now was the means given to Sasuke by Nangong to summon the Blood Cloak Pavilion disciples. It must not be used unless it is a critical moment, because this jade pendant represents the highest order of Nangong. As long as there is this jade pendant, the Blood Cloak Pavilion disciples can do anything. Chapter 460. In the headquarters of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, the leader of the Greenwood Altar, Old Man Aoki, was standing in front of his sickbed, looking at Itachi's lifeless body with a solemn expression. The Bloodrobe Pavilion's head order allowed anyone in Bloodrobe Pavilion to unconditionally carry out the orders of the holder, and it was the same for Aoki. After Sasuke met the 17 disciples of Five-Element Altar from Bloodrobe Pavilion, he ordered his brother Itachi Uchiha's body to be brought to Bloodrobe Pavilion's headquarters as soon as possible. After meeting Aogi Altar Lord Aogi, who was in charge of logistics in Bloodrobe Pavilion, Sasuke left and asked Aogi to do his best to save his brother's life. However, although Aogi was good at medicine, he didn't have the ability to reverse life and death. For Itachi Uchiha, who was already dead, Aogi also expressed his powerlessness. But Sasuke, who had fallen into a kind of paranoia, how could he listen to Aogi's words? He just blindly forced Aogi to do his best to save Itachi Uchiha. Aogi had no choice but to contact Nangongja, who was far away and would leave Ninja Village, through Clearwater Altar's channel as soon as possible, hoping that his head could come and persuade the kid who held the head order. After receiving the news, Nangongja also explained some things, then immediately opened the teleportation formation and came to Bloodrobe Pavilion. After opening the door, Nangongja walked into the room where Itachi Uchiha's body was stored. After seeing Nangongja, Aogi also quickly saluted Nangongja's head. This subordinate is incompetent. There is really no way. Nangongja waved his hand, indicating that Aogi didn't need to say anything. After he understood the situation, he slowly walked to Sasuke's side, put his hand on Sasuke's shoulder, and said to Sasuke, "Sasuke, it seems that you are very unwilling to accept this." Sasuke didn't answer Nangongja's words. He just raised his head and looked at Nangongja with a hopeful face, as if he hoped that Nangongja could tell him that there was a way to bring his brother back to life. Seeing Sasuke's sad and stubborn eyes, Nangongja slightly shook his head and said to Sasuke, "Haven't you accepted the reality? Your brother, my friend Itachi Uchiha, has left this world." Sasuke's words was like a hammer, Sasuke's heart, making Sasuke felt that his breathing hats. In his impression was Sensei's sensei. I don't. Both of him and I Uchiha of him and I of Usrobe. It's too selfish of Itachi to leave this world like this. Facing Nangongja, Sasuke finally put down his heart slowly and said such words. Yes, Sasuke felt that his brother was a bit cunning. Obviously, Itachi was still facing so many difficulties and obstacles, but he still irresponsibly left this world after saying all the words of asking him to do. At this moment, Sasuke was actually very confused, because when he was young, Sasuke had been chasing the back of his brother's genius. He only hoped that his father could praise him as much as he praised his brother. Later, the Uchiha clan incident happened, and the culprit of the incident, his brother, who he had been chasing, became his biggest enemy. In order to defeat his brother and get the truth, Sasuke tried his best. Even if he joined Orochimaru and gave up his companions, Sasuke had no regrets. But now, although he has been changing his role, Itachi Uchiha, who has always been his target, will never come back. At this moment, Sasuke's heart was full of confusion after losing his goal. That's why Sasuke refused to accept the fact that his brother was dead and wanted to find a way to bring his brother back to life. But now, Nangongja ruthlessly tore off the last layer of Sasuke's deceit, and Sasuke finally said his true thoughts. Looking at Sasuke in front of him, Nangongja's heart was full of melancholy. How old is Sasuke this year? 15 or 16 years old. Although for a ninja, this age is no longer young, but at this age, there is still a desire to rely on a person's mentality. For Sasuke, presumably, Itachi is the existence he wants and is most willing to rely on. Sasuke, no one can accompany you to the end. Looking at Sasuke, Nangongja said to Sasuke with some serious words, This world is a very cruel world, and everyone's life is threatened in all kinds of ways. Maybe in your opinion, your brother, and even me are existences you can rely on. But we can only let you rely on us for a while, not for a lifetime. Your life is your life, after all. I know. After losing your brother, you instantly felt that you lost a pillar you could rely on. I know that feeling of powerlessness, and I can make up a lot of excuses to make you feel that I have the ability to bring Itachi back to your side. But that would be letting down Itachi's painstaking efforts, and all of Itachi's efforts would be in vain. So, I don't want to comfort you, but I want you to see the truth clearly. Sadness is never solved by escaping. There's only one way to solve sadness, and that is face it. After saying these words, Nangongja waved his hand and signaled the disciples of Bloodcloak Pavilion in the room and the 3 members of Sasuke's snake team to leave the room together, leaving some space for Sasuke and Itachi. Yugo, Red Lotus, and Sujetsu looked at Sasuke, who seemed to be a little lost and could only walk out of the room helplessly. Separation of life and death is the most difficult thing for human beings to face. Such emotions, regardless of whether one is a ninja or a civilian, as long as there is still humanity, there is no way to completely eliminate such emotions. Sasuke seemed to notice that everyone walked out and slowly moved his steps to Itachi's side. Looking at Itachi's face that still had a bit of relief, Sasuke's eyes slowly thawed, and drops of tears flowed from Sasuke's eyes. When was the last time he cried because of sadness? Sasuke didn't know, but Sasuke just wanted to cry wantonly now. Chapter 461. Drops of tears squeezed out from Sasuke's eyes, and tears continued to flow down Sasuke's cheeks, leaving a shallow tear stain. But Sasuke didn't cry out any sound. This wasn't because Sasuke could control his emotions, but because Sasuke couldn't control himself at all. The sadness and pain were choked in his throat, so tears seemed to be the only way for Sasuke to vent his inner feelings. Drops of tears kept flowing from Sasuke's eyes, across his cheeks, and dripped to the ground. Sasuke didn't know how many tears he cried, but warm liquid never stopped flowing from his eyes. If someone could stand opposite Sasuke, it wouldn't be difficult to find that Sasuke's tears had unknowingly turned into blood tears, and bright red traces of blood were left on Sasuke's face. The 3 Tomo Sharingan, which had already shown signs of transforming into Manjikyu Sharingan, also rotated at a high speed at this moment, and gradually the 3 Tomo continued to expand and gradually connected together. The outline of a 6-pointed star appeared in Sasuke's eyes, and even the sadness couldn't cover the brilliance of this pair of Manjikyu Sharingan. Although Sasuke couldn't see what happened to his eyes, the sudden appearance of a powerful eye power completely different from the 3 Tomo Sharingan told Sasuke that his eyes had evolved again. Only by personally participating in the death of a loved one can the cursed power be awakened. In Sasuke's view, if it wasn't to expel the remnants of Orochimaru's power from his body, his brother would never have lost his life like this. What's the difference between such a scene and killing his brother with his own hands? Perhaps he had cried enough, or perhaps he was tired of crying. Sasuke raised his sleeve and wiped his face, wiping the tears that were already all over his face. Sasuke took out the scroll that Hoodlum had thrown to him and gently opened it. Sasuke found that it was filled with dense patterns. If ordinary people saw such patterns, they would be dazzled and dizzy in less than 2 minutes. But Sasuke, who had just awakened his Manjikyu Sharingan, didn't close his Manjikyu Sharingan. These dense patterns slowly surged in Sasuke's eyes at this moment, forming a character. Sasuke carefully looked at the hidden text in the scroll, and for a moment, he was fascinated. The patterns in this scroll were copied from the stone tablet in the ancestral hall of the Uchiha clan. The stone tablet recorded some mysteries about the Sharingan and some secrets of the ninja world. The origin of the Uchiha clan and the mystery of Manjikyu Sharingan were naturally also recorded in it. Sasuke looked at the scroll and whispered softly, "Eyes of loved one. Eternal Manjikyu, eternal Manjikyu." Sasuke finally understood what Hoodlum said about his brother's last legacy. By transplanting his brother's Manjikyu Sharingan, he can make his Manjikyu evolve again. Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. He doesn't have to worry about his dojutsu drying up, and it may even give birth to a new power. After a short whisper, there was a long silence. Sasuke just quietly looked at the scroll in his hand that recorded all kinds of secrets, and his eyes passed over his brother from time to time. Outside the room where Sasuke was located, the three members of the Snake Squad and Xianxia were staring at the door, waiting for Sasuke to appear. The three members of the Snake Squad looked very nervous. After all, such a squad actually existed with Sasuke as the core. Once Sasuke couldn't accept the fact that his brother died, then such a squad naturally couldn't be talked about. For the three members of Sasuke's team, the Snake Squad was an important existence to achieve their respective goals. Once such a squad no longer exists, it also means that their goals will be difficult to achieve. Xianxia looked very calm. After all, Xianxia also watched Sasuke walk step by step to this extent. Xianxia also understood the confusion and pain that Sasuke experienced. Because of this, Xianxia was more aware of how strong Sasuke's heart was. There was no way to completely defeat Sasuke's suffering. For Sasuke, it was an opportunity to go further. Squeak! The door of the room where Sasuke was located gently opened, and Sasuke walked out with firm steps. Seeing Sasuke, the three members of the Snake Squad immediately greeted him. Although they were worried, no one spoke, because Sasuke's eyes were staring at Xianxia at the moment. Obviously, he had something to say. Slowly walking to Xianxia's side, Sasuke suddenly bowed to Xianxia, and his proud spine bent down at the moment. Xianxia-sensei, thank you. If it weren't for you, I might have to do something that even I can't forgive myself because of the sadness and hatred in my heart. It was you who gave me the opportunity to let my brother leave this world with a smile. It was also you who gave my family a chance to save their lives. Although I hope that I can help you more, at this moment, I can only say such a soft thank you to you. Sasuke said sincerely. The more Sasuke grew, the more he understood how unfathomable his Kenjutsu sensei was. However, Xianxia's strength directly made Sasuke have no way to repay Xianxia. After all, what Sasuke could do, Xianxia could do even better. So Sasuke could only say such a soft thank you to Xianxia for telling him the truth and saving his parents' lives. Xianxia patted Sasuke's shoulder, just like how he treated Sasuke when he was a child, and said with a caring tone, "Don't be like this. Sensei helped you not only because you're my disciple, but I also gain a lot from it, so you don't have to take my motives too seriously. But I see that you have come out of the sadness of Itachi's departure, and it seems that you have redefined your goal, which makes me feel more gratified." Unlike the previous Sasuke, who was full of hatred and paranoia, the current Sasuke's eyes were much clearer. Xianxia liked this look very much, so Xianxia's face also had a little smile. Chapter 462. Xianxia-sensei, I've decided to join Akatsuki. Not for any other reason, I just hope that my brother's work won't end in vain. Furthermore, it seems that I can only make greater progress if I go to that suspicious person's place. Sasuke said his decision to Xianxia-sensei. Sasuke, who has been following Orochimaru, has actually been exposed to a lot of information that is difficult for ordinary ninjas to access. Although it seems like a pool of stagnant water now, Sasuke naturally saw the hidden waves surging in the shinobi world. A catastrophe that can't be resisted by a single person is quietly brewing, and Akatsuki, as the core of the storm, is naturally the place to understand and even eliminate such a catastrophe. Xianxia-sensei took Sasuke's hand and led him step by step to the front of the Bloodcloth Pavilion's gate. Since it's something you've decided on, then go on bravely. You have been very smart since you were a child, and after so many years of experience, I also believe that you can be responsible for the decisions you make, so I won't say anything unnecessary to you. After all, I also hate nagging. You just need to remember that no matter when you need me or the Bloodcloth Pavilion's help, you must tell me. With that, Nangongji Sensei took out a carved red jade pendant from his arms and stuffed it in Sasuke's hand. It was the chief token that represented the Bloodcloth Pavilion's prestige. Looking at the precious chief token that was once again given to Sasuke by Nangongji Sensei, Aoki, who has been on the side, opened his eyes wide in disbelief. If it weren't for Sasuke's Uchiha clan bloodline and age, Aoki would have thought that Sasuke was likely to be Nangongji Sensei's illegitimate child. Otherwise, how could such a token be given to Sasuke again and again? Looking at the chief token that was given to him by Nangongji Sensei, Sasuke didn't refuse. Instead, he solemnly received the chief token in his hand. Sasuke was very clear that what he will face later is likely to be impossible to deal with alone. So accepting Nangongji Sensei's kindness is actually a matter of course, isn't it? When the three members of the Snake Squad saw Sasuke receive the chief token from Nangongji Sensei, they immediately felt relieved. After seeing the size of the Bloodcloth Pavilion and the strong in it, the three people were very clear how powerful the Bloodcloth Pavilion was. Such a token is no different from a life-saving means. Originally, they were worried that Sasuke wouldn't accept because of his pride. So after seeing Sasuke accept such a token, they also cast a grateful look at Nangongji Sensei. Patting Sasuke's shoulder, Nangongji said to Sasuke very freely, "Well, since you have already decided on the path you want to take, there is no need to hesitate. When you joined Orochimaru, I didn't stop you. This time, I won't stop you either. Work hard and achieve your goal." Hearing Nangongji Sensei's words, Sasuke didn't have any pretentious expression. After nodding to Nangongji Sensei, he walked out of the Bloodcloth Pavilion's gate with his teammates and took firm and powerful steps towards the deep forest. Seeing Sasuke's figure disappear, Nangongji Sensei finally turned his head and said to old man Aoki, who had been standing behind him and obviously had something to say, "Altar leader Aoki, what do you want to say to me now?" Nangongji knew that old man Aoki, a veteran of the Bloodcloak Pavilion, must have some grudges in his heart when he saw him giving the Bloodcloak Pavilion chief token to Sasuke again and again. So, he didn't hide anything and asked old man Aoki. After all, old man Aoki has been with Nangongji Sensei for a long time, so he naturally has some understanding of Nangongji Sensei's character. Although Nangongji Sensei's mind is very flexible, most of the time, he still hates the way of speaking in a roundabout way, so old man Aoki naturally said what he wanted to say. "Leader, I really don't understand why you helped this kid from the Uchiha clan again and again. The reputation of the Uchiha clan in the ninja world is obvious to all. That is, a group of fickle and greedy wolves. There is no possibility of feeding them. And although this kid's aptitude is good, it's only good. Although he could be called a prodigy among his peers in the Blood Clothing Pavilion, that was all there was to it. You invested so much in him, I really don't think it's worth it." Listening to old man Aoki's words, Nangongji Sensei also nodded his head from time to time. Because what old man Aoki said is indeed true, there are countless geniuses in this world, and it's easy for them to grow up after getting the right training. Sasuke is not so unique. After all, Nangongji Sensei's efforts are really not enough to make ends meet. "Altar leader Aoki, I understand what you mean, but I don't regret such a decision. Sasuke can be regarded as a child that I have seen since he was a child. For a cultivator, talent, hard work, and opportunities are all indispensable factors for growth. But I see the trace of destiny in Sasuke. I always have a hunch. Sasuke may be the next Uchiha Madara of the Uchiha clan, or even an existence that surpasses Uchiha Madara. This hunch comes without a reason, but it makes me extremely convinced. Now it seems that I have paid a lot, but in fact, most of it is insignificant. Our Blood Garment Pavilion and myself didn't suffer too many losses. Using such a small amount of resources in exchange for the friendship of a possible future super expert is actually worth it. If my hunch is true, our Bloodcloth Pavilion will naturally make a lot of money. If my premonition is not true, then just treat it as me, the head disciple, being obsessed for a moment and making a small foolish move." Nangongji-sensei's words have already reached this point. Even old man Aoki had nothing more to say. Thinking about it carefully, even if Sasuke really misused the chief token, what kind of consequences will it lead to? At worst, they will just sacrifice a few disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. If they really want to drag the Bloodcloth Pavilion into the undercurrent of the ninja world, it's useless to rely on a chief token that has more symbolic meaning than practical significance. As for whether Nangongji-sensei can do well in his position as the chief of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, hasn't it been enough to prove it over the years? Chapter 463. After leaving the Bloodcloak Pavilion, Sasuke took his 3 teammates to the address recorded in the scroll given to him by Hoodlum. During the journey, Sasuke also explained his plan to his 3 teammates. After all, Akatsuki is not a gathering place of good men and women, and the danger involved in it is self-evident. After Orochimaru escaped from Akatsuki, he could only hide from Akatsuki's pursuit. I know that what I do is very dangerous, and I also know that each of you chose to follow me for your own reasons. For my wish, you put your life on the balance. Such a thing is not what I expect. So now I'm giving you a chance. If you don't want to take risks with me, you can leave now. Seeing that his group was about to reach the meeting place indicated by Hoodlum, Sasuke suddenly stopped his footsteps and looked at his 3 teammates who had been following him silently all the way. If it was before under Orochimaru's command, such a question would never exist. Sasuke would only use all means to force his 3 teammates to take risks with him. But now, Sasuke's mentality has changed quietly. Human life seems to have some value in Sasuke's eyes that can't be ignored. Sasuke's question also stunned Hanrin, Suigetsu, and Yugo. Watching his 2 companions fall into silence, Suigetsu touched the huge Zanpakuto on his back with his hand. His eyes seemed to have some reminiscence as he said to Sasuke, "Oh, I didn't expect that the 2 bravest members in our team would actually shrink back this time." With a sarcastic smile, Suigetsu's eyes swept over Hanrin and Yugo. "I actually don't like troublesome things. Things like joining a dangerous place like Akatsuki. If it's a normal time, I will definitely refuse without hesitation. But if you ask me now, am I willing to join Akatsuki with you? I will tell you with certainty that I am willing. My brother has been a genius since he was a child. Everyone I know since I was a child would praise my brother in front of me without hesitation. He skillfully used the 7 secret swords of the Mist-Hidden Village to complete a difficult task. Such a brother is simply the most dazzling sun in the sky. I once thought that I would be stung by my brother's brilliance in my life, but who would have thought that such a dazzling brother would die so quietly? After being caught by Orochimaru, I felt very confused. I thought that I might only be locked in a narrow cultivation tank and become Orochimaru's plaything. At this point, Shueiyue's face revealed a very rare expression of powerlessness. It was a sharp contrast to her usual cheerful appearance. So even the seemingly happy and lively Shueiyue could actually show such an expression? But soon, Suigetsu regained his usual smiling appearance. After reaching out and pointing in the direction of Sasuke, Suigetsu continued, "It's you Uchiha Sasuke who rescued me from that kind of predicament. It allowed me to obtain the great beheading blade and allowed me to find the path after that. So, no matter what kind of danger we will encounter, I, Suigetsu, will accompany you to the end." We agreed to collect all the 7 swords of the Mist-Hidden Village. You can't just turn a blind eye to the shark face in the Akatsuki. After listening to Suigetsu's words, Sasuke didn't know what kind of expression to make in response to Suigetsu's trust and following. After all, he had a lot of selfish motives when he recruited them. Sasuke could only nod with a pale face, signaling Suigetsu to stand behind him. Suigetsu didn't seem to care. After all, everyone knew Sasuke's character. After listening to Suigetsu's words, Red Lotus also tidied up his hair and said to Sasuke, "Suigetsu, this guy is still so talkative. Such a simple thing, he has to say so much. Since I have decided to be your teammate, how can I give up so easily? No matter what kind of danger he will encounter, I am not afraid. In other words, the more dangerous it is, the happier I feel. Red Lotus looked a little excited, as if she had already imagined the appearance of fighting with countless strong people. That kind of happy mood and rushing out of the room was engraved on Red Lotus's heroic face. Like Suigetsu, Red Lotus also slowly stood behind Sasuke. Sasuke, Red Lotus, and Suigetsu all put their eyes on Yugo, who was still standing in the same place. Yugo scratched his head slightly and seemed to be a little embarrassed and said to Sasuke and the others, "I'm sorry. I'm a very slow person who can't express his feelings. You all said so much, I don't know what to say. But you're people who make me feel like companions. Since you are companions, naturally, you can't abandon each other because of a little difficulty. Let's keep going." Turning his head, Sasuke's eyes swept over his three teammates, and unknowingly, his face also quietly climbed up with a smile. He seems to have unknowingly gained a few friends who are worth cherishing for a lifetime. He didn't say much, because Suigetsu, Red Lotus, and Yugo's attitude had already been revealed. Saying one more word in such a situation, Sasuke felt that it would be an insult to his three teammates. So Sasuke just turned his body silently and set foot in the direction of meeting Hoodlum again. Seeing Sasuke's expression, Suigetsu, Red Lotus, and Yugo smiled at each other. They seemed very happy and followed Sasuke's forward steps together. How satisfying and happy it is for a person to be able to find something they're willing to do and someone they're willing to follow in their life. At this moment, Suigetsu, Red Lotus, and Yugo's hearts were filled with a sense of satisfaction. It was this kind of satisfaction that made Suigetsu, Red Lotus, and Yugo feel that they can face any difficulties. After all, they will never be alone from now on, and they will always have their teammates standing by their side, right? Everyone was actually afraid of being alone. Chapter 464. I knew you would come. Because you are a member of the Uchiha family. You are Itachi's younger brother. Looking at Sasuke, who was slowly walking towards him with his three companions, Hoodlum's eyes flashed with confidence. Ignoring Suigetsu and the others, Hoodlum just looked at Sasuke and said, and Hoodlum's words were naturally heard by Sasuke. When he heard Hoodlum say his brother's name, Sasuke already wanted to pull out his long sword and tell this hypocritical guy, how can he casually mention his brother's name? But Sasuke has grown up. He was no longer the naive and ignorant boy who used to put all his emotions on his face. So he suppressed his anger and kept his cold expression. Sasuke said to Hoodlum, brother Hoodlum, I'm here, and I agree to your conditions. The so-called conditions were actually very simple. Hoodlum hoped that Sasuke could replace his brother Itachi Uchiha's position and become a member of Akatsuki. After all, Sharingan has a unique advantage in dealing with Bijou. The loss of Itachi has actually hindered Akatsuki's recovery of Bijou. But Hoodlum, who also has Manjikyu Sharingan, can't appear so openly to collect Bijou. Pain, who has Rinnegan, also has to stabilize Akatsuki's situation. So Sasuke, who also has Manjikyu Sharingan, naturally became the best candidate to recruit into Akatsuki. And the Manjikyu Sharingan, left by the dead Itachi, can push Sasuke's Manjikyu Sharingan to the height of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. Of course, since it's a deal, Sasuke naturally also got a promise that Akatsuki will provide shelter for Sasuke, and Sasuke's snake team will participate in Akatsuki's operations as a semi-mercenary, and not completely become a member of Akatsuki. So, Itachi's eyes, Hoodlum's eyes had a bit of light, and his meaning was self-evident. Hoodlum obviously hoped that Sasuke could use Itachi's legacy as soon as possible and turn his eyes into eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. Only with enough strength can he complete Akatsuki's tasks more efficiently, right? After hearing Hoodlum's words, Sasuke's originally suppressed anger finally burned uncontrollably. His originally dark eyes were covered with scarlet blood in an instant, and Manjikyu Sharingan in the shape of a hexagram appeared in Sasuke's eyes. Sasuke's eye power was mobilized crazily, and the powerful ninjutsu brought by Manjikyu Sharingan was instantly summoned by Sasuke. Although it was only in the form of a skeleton and not a complete body, the aura that seemed to come from ancient times rushed straight toward Hoodlum. Sasuke's Susanoo raised his arm, and the virtual armament Heavenly Hemp Ancient Bow appeared on Susanoo's arm. Under Sasuke's control, Susanoo pulled the bowstring of Heavenly Hemp Ancient Bow with one hand, and the dark Amaterasu flame turned into a black arrow, and the burning arrowhead pointed straight at Hoodlum. Only I can decide these things. Remember the relationship between you and me. You have no right to order me, and no right to dispose of my brother's body. In the face of Sasuke's almost naked threat, Hoodlum not only didn't get angry, but he also laughed. This is what I want. Hoodlum's heart was very clear that Itachi was a taboo for Sasuke, and being mentioned by anyone may arouse Sasuke's anger. But after seeing Sasuke, Hoodlum intentionally or unintentionally mentioned Itachi Uchiha's name, with the purpose of testing Sasuke's reaction. At the beginning, Sasuke's calm appearance actually made Hoodlum's heart very uncalm, because such a calm attitude was not what Hoodlum wanted to see. Therefore, Hoodlum could only continue to use Itachi's body to stimulate Sasuke with Itachi's Manjikyu Sharingan. Fortunately, this time, it was not beyond Hoodlum's expectations, and Sasuke burst into a strong anger. Even under the stimulation of such emotions, Sasuke actually used Susanoo with his newly acquired Manjikyu Sharingan, and even used Heavenly Hemp Ancient Bow, which was not inferior to Yadano Kagami and Totsuka's sword. When the arrow condensed by the dark Amaterasu flame pointed at him, Hoodlum's heart was filled with the satisfaction of controlling others. Put away your Susanoo. Looking at Sasuke, Hoodlum seemed to admit defeat and said softly to Sasuke, "You just opened Manjikyu Sharingan. Although you can use Susanoo after reading the scroll without any systematic training, you still need to use it. But now you're using a lot of your eye power at the cost of forcibly using such a move, which will cause great damage to your eyes. Although you and I are not friends, we are far from enemies. You don't need to pay such a price." Hoodlum also stretched out his hand and pointed at Sasuke's eyes. Because using Susanoo at this moment caused a certain degree of burden on his eyes, Sasuke's eyes were bleeding. After hearing Hoodlum's words, Sasuke seemed to stabilize his emotions. He closed his eyes and turned his Manjikyu Sharingan into the original dark color, and the huge Susanoo summoned by Sasuke slowly disappeared without a trace. Hoodlum opened his hand, and a space vortex appeared in Hoodlum's hand, and 4 uniforms representing Akatsuki's black background and red clouds also appeared in Hoodlum's hand. Slowly walking to Sasuke's side, Hoodlum handed the 4 uniforms in his hand to Sasuke, and said to Sasuke, "Although you belong to the nature of mercenaries, after all, you represent our Akatsuki, so you still have to wear these uniforms. Presumably, you still have Itachi Uchiha's ring. That ring has a lot of functions, and it will also be a tool for us to give you tasks. From today on, Uchiha Sasuke, you will be Akatsuki's new Suzaku." Listening to Hoodlum's words, Sasuke also took out the ring with the words written on it, which he took off from Itachi's finger before leaving. Originally, he just wanted to use it as a souvenir, but he didn't expect it to have such a use. Chapter 465. After a short conversation with Hoodlum, Sasuke took his 3 teammates to embark on the first mission of becoming Akatsuki's mercenaries. The mission's destination is the very distant Cloud Village in the Land of Lightning. It seems that Sasuke's team is about to face another difficult battle. In a land of fire, with Leaf Village, the sun was still so bright and warm, and every villager's face was filled with joy and happiness. As the highest leader of the village, Yondaime Hokage Watergate was sitting in his office at the moment, discussing this year's Wood Leaf Ninja training program and the specific adjustment plan of the Wood Leaf Medical Ninja training program with some of his subordinates. Minato and his subordinates argued and discussed some of the details. Although everyone seemed to be arguing until their faces turned red, everyone could feel the light of hope from them, because they all knew that their arguments were not meaningless. On the contrary, an idea they put forward now may become Woodleaf's policy for the next year. For those who worked in politics, even a promotion was far less exciting than having one suggestion adopted and implemented. Just as they were discussing whether to further expand the scope of the Woodleaf Medical Ninja Training Program and expand the recruitment of ninjas from newly graduated genin to some chunin and even jonin, a knock on the door directly interrupted their conversation. Watergate's face was slightly unhappy, his good-looking eyebrows slightly wrinkled together. He stretched out his hand and waved to his subordinates, indicating them to wait for a moment and then continue the discussion. Watergate slowly walked to the door of his office, putting his hand on the handle of his door and gently turning the door handle. Watergate raised his head and glanced at the person who interrupted the lively discussion at such a moment. But what Watergate didn't expect was that the person who knocked on the door was not a subordinate who brought him office documents, but his teacher, Jiraiya, who officially married Tsunade not long ago. Since it was Jiraiya, Watergate naturally couldn't just put on a sour face, so he tried his best to make his face look better. Watergate welcomed Jiraiya, who was standing at the door, into his office. Some department heads in the office waiting for Watergate's return saw Jiraiya coming in and greeted him very politely. In the face of these Konoha administrators, Jiraiya wasn't so cold. But they were all congratulating him on his marriage, so of course, Jiraiya couldn't lose face like this. So he smiled at them and exchanged a few words in return. Jiraiya and Tsunade just got married a few days ago. At such a time, he came to find his disciple. Naturally, there should be something important, so Watergate said to his department head, "Everyone, please go back first. We will make an appointment later to continue discussing the modification of the plan." These department heads naturally knew that Watergate had something important to say to their teacher, one of the Woodleaf Sannin, Jiraiya, so they were very reasonable. After bidding farewell to Watergate and Jiraiya, they also walked out of Hokage's office one by one. After sending away his subordinates, Watergate closed the door of his office. Walking to Jiraiya's side with a little concern, Watergate said to Jiraiya, "Sensei, why are you here at this time? I thought you and Tsunade-sama were going to enjoy the sweet time of your honeymoon." Speaking of sweet time, Watergate's eyes suddenly turned, looked at his teacher, and found that Jiraiya was indeed a little old. As the saying goes, 30 is like a wolf, 40 is like a tiger. Counting the time, Tsunade-sama is also at the age of a wolf and a tiger. Is she my sensei? During this time, Watergate also felt a dull pain in his waist after seeing his wife Shinakushina. After all, everyone is a ninja, and their physical fitness is not ordinary. With a little concern, Watergate took Jiraiya's hand and said to his teacher, "Sensei, don't worry. We are all men, I understand. I have a prescription here that I found before. Although I haven't tried it, I heard that the effect is very significant. Would you like me to give you a prescription to try?" Although Watergate didn't say it explicitly, they were all men, and the meaning of Watergate's words was very clear to Jiraiya. Hearing that someone doubted his ability, even if this person was his disciple, Jiraiya was very upset and said to Watergate, No. The pamphlet that Nangongja gave me before is very effective." Halfway through his words, Jiraiya realized that he seemed to be led astray by his disciple. So after a quick cough, he said to Watergate with a serious face, "I didn't come here to talk to you about such things. It's really a serious matter. Do you understand?" Hearing Jiraiya's words, Watergate also put away the evil thoughts in his heart and sat upright, facing Jiraiya. Obviously, he was ready to listen to what Jiraiya said. Seeing that Watergate was serious, Jiraiya continued to say to Watergate, "I know that you have been busy with various matters in Woodleaf Village during this time, but I hope you can spare some time and go to Mount Myaboku with me." Watergate looked at Jiraiya with a little doubt and asked, "Mount Myaboku? Is there a new prophecy from Totema Sennin?" Watergate naturally knew about Totema Sennin's prophecy ability of Mount Myaboku, and in Watergate's mind, this was the only reason why Jiraiya mentioned Mount Myaboku so seriously. But after hearing Watergate's words, Jiraiya slowly shook his head and said to Watergate, "No, Great Totema Sennin is still sleeping. The reason why I would take you to Mount Myaboku this time is because I think you should learn Mount Mayaboku's secret sage mode. After the last battle with Pain, I thought that Pain might have other abilities to restore the Rakudo-S clones that he had lost. After studying the black stick we brought back, Tsunade also told me that the function of this black stick is actually to conduct chakra. Rakudo-S clones are made of corpses, so it's possible to repair or change a body. With your current strength, it's still a bit difficult to deal with Pain's Rakudo, so in order to protect Wood Leaf, I think it's necessary to take you to Mount Mayaboku to practice Sage Mode. Chapter 466. Sage Mode is a state where you can use natural energy. In this state, you can use natural energy to greatly increase physical activity to increase attack power and defense. At the same time, you can use natural energy to increase physical attack range and perception. Such a state is extremely significant for a person's combat power, just like when Jiraiya fought with Pain's Six Paths doppelganger. In Sage Mode, Jiraiya was able to fight with Pain's Six Paths doppelganger, and he destroyed 5 of his doppelgangers. Moreover, Jiraiya didn't hone his Sage Mode to perfection. In Jiraiya's view, Watergate is far better than him in terms of talent and physical fitness. If he really practices Sage Mode, he will be able to succeed in a very short time, and he may even be able to practice the most perfect Sage Mode in history. In order to deal with the future danger, Jiraiya came to Watergate's office and proposed his idea to Watergate. Jiraiya naturally knows how difficult such a proposal is to realize. Even the most ordinary ninja can only get a period of vacation after completing a lot of tasks. As the leader of Wood Leaf Village, Watergate has almost no concept of vacation. Even if he accompanied his son Naruto to practice, Watergate still left his shadow clone in his office. Once there is something important, the shadow clone will automatically disappear and inform Watergate to return to the office to deal with official business. If Watergate agrees to Jiraiya's proposal, then it means that Watergate will have to practice in Mount Mayaboku for a few months or even longer. For Watergate, such a period of time is to push away most or even all of his official business. For the leader of Ninja Village, this is unimaginable. Jiraiya is clear about these things, and Watergate is naturally more clear about it. So Watergate also slowly rubbed his chin with his hand. In the past few days, Watergate has been dealing with various official business in the Hokage's office, and a little stubble has grown on his chin. The roughness brought by the stubble didn't make Watergate feel uncomfortable. Instead, it made Watergate feel calmer. After weighing the pros and cons in his heart again and again, Watergate seemed to be very entangled whether he should go to Mount Mayaboku with Jiraiya or not. As the Hokage, his duty is to protect the Wood Leaf Village. Going to Mount Mayaboku to practice Sage Mode and enhance his strength is naturally a way to protect the Wood Leaf Village. However, if he abandoned his official duties at Wood Leaf and allowed Wood Leaf to get into trouble, wouldn't he be failing his duties even more? Teacher, looking at Jiraiya, Watergate said slowly. After hearing Watergate's slightly heavy tone, Jiraiya's heart slowly sank to the bottom. Yes, after all, Watergate is the Hokage, the leader of Wood Leaf Village. It was indeed unimaginable for a person of such status to leave the village that he was determined to protect and go to Mount Mayaboku to cultivate for a few months or even longer. Jiraiya-sensei, I have decided. I hope I can go to Mount Mayaboku to practice Sage Mode. You are right. With my current strength, it is not enough to protect the entire Wood Leaf Village. With that, Watergate remembered the masked man who used space ninjutsu when Nine Tails attacked, and the ability of 6 Paths of Pain that his sensei described to him. It is indeed not enough to rely on his current strength. But what about Wood Leaf? Hearing Watergate say that he wants to go to Mount Mayaboku to practice Sage Mode, Jiraiya was naturally very happy. But Jiraiya still asked his doubts. After all, Wood Leaf is also the place that Jiraiya is determined to protect. If Wood Leaf is damaged because of reckless actions, Jiraiya will not forgive himself. Don't worry, Sensei. I have considered this problem, so I plan to go to Mount Mayaboku alone. I will leave a shadow clone in Woodleaf Village to deal with daily affairs. As long as I don't fight, I think this shadow clone will be enough to last for several months. As for some important affairs, I will entrust Narashikaku and my shadow clone to decide together. And some security issues may trouble you and Sensei's wife. After all, both of you are strong people in Woodleaf. In case of any emergency, you will be enough to stabilize the situation. If it doesn't work, you can let the Toad of Mount Mayaboku inform me, and I will immediately return to Woodleaf through reverse summoning. Listening to Watergate's words, Jiraiya's hanging heart gradually relaxed. Although this may not be the best plan, it is the best and most practical solution that can be thought of in such a situation. For Watergate's proposal, Jiraiya naturally has no intention to refuse. Well, you go arrange the relevant matters first, and we'll go to Mount Mayaboku. When we get there, I will explain to Fukasaku Sannin and Shima Sannin, and then I will return with Leaf to help you take care of the overall situation. Watergate heard Jiraiya's words and directly made a hand seal to summon a shadow clone. This shadow clone was infused with more than half of Watergate's chakra to maintain the stability of a shadow clone. Then Watergate turned to Jiraiya and said, "We are pressed for time. I know that it takes not only effort to cultivate Sage Mode, but also a lot of time. So let's not waste any second. I will let the Shadow Clone take care of these things. Let's go to Mount Mayaboku now." Although Watergate's tone was very flat, there was still a bit of urgency and tension in it. Now for Watergate, perhaps Sage Mode is the fastest way to increase his strength. Only by grasping such power in his own hands, Watergate can better guard with Leaf, guard his family, and guard his loved ones. Watergate and Jiraiya stood together and made hand seals together. Reverse summoning jutsu was completed in an instant. A cloud of smoke rose, and the figures of Jiraiya and Watergate also disappeared in it. Seeing that his main body had left, Watergate's shadow clone scratched his hair slightly and seemed to be a little distressed and muttered to himself, "My main body really left me with a big problem. Not to mention how to explain to those old stubborn elders of Kiba. How am I going to explain to Shinakushina? Suddenly leaving the ninja village without saying a word. I will definitely be beaten by Shinakushina, right? I am just a shadow clone. If I am beaten like that, how can I complete my task?" Chapter 467. How Watergate's shadow clone convinced with Leaf Elders and Shinakushina was subconsciously ignored by Watergate, because Watergate and Jiraiya had already arrived at the territory of Mount Mayaboku. For the arrival of Watergate and Jiraiya, the Toads of Mount Mayaboku didn't have any special reaction. But after the grown-up Toad, Kishi, and Toad Dragon pestered Watergate and asked why Naruto didn't come, Watergate and Jiraiya directly met Fukasaku Sannin and Shima Sannin. I didn't expect Jiraiya's stupid mouth to be able to persuade Watergate Boy to put down his job as Hokage and come to Mount Mayaboku to practice Sage Mode. Has there been such a big change after marriage? Looking at Watergate, Fukasaku Sannin said with a little surprise. Shima Sannin and Izurin, who stood next to Fukasaku Sannin, didn't speak, but the look in her eyes was obviously some emotion. Jiraiya was able to persuade Watergate. Fukasaku Sannin and Shima Sannin naturally knew about the marriage of Jiraiya and Tsunade. Even when Jiraiya got married, Fukasaku Sannin and Shima Sannin also brought some local specialties from Mount Mayaboku, various types of insects to congratulate them. Jiraiya, who stood on Watergate's side and didn't speak, also became a little gray after experiencing the double blow of Fukasaku Sannin and Shima Sannin. Ignoring Jiraiya's reaction, Fukasaku Sannin looked at Watergate and said, "Presumably, Jiraiya has probably told Watergate Boy what Sage Mode is before, right?" Hearing Fukasaku Sannin's question, Watergate, who was about to appease his sensei, also quickly said to Fukasaku Sannin, "Yes, I already know that Sage Mode absorbs the free natural energy in the air and mixes it with your own physical energy and spiritual power to create a special chakra called Senjutsu Chakra. Through this special chakra, a person's physical fitness and ninjutsu ability can be greatly enhanced. There is nothing wrong with Watergate's words. So Fukasaku Sanin also touched the beard on his chin and said to Watergate with a little relief, "Indeed, everything about Sage Mode is based on Senjutsu Chakra. But there are also many hidden dangers in Sage Mode. After all, the natural energy in the air is not a gentle thing. On the contrary, if your carelessness, the natural energy can may riot. For so many years, the only person I've seen who can tame the violent natural energy is the kid who cultivated the internal force that Jiraiya brought to Mount Mayaboku." Haha. Listening to Fukasaku Senin's words, Watergate's face also changed slightly. The Sunin. It seems that Fukasaku Senin is talking about Xianxia, who has been wandering outside his control in Woodleaf Village. And listening to Fukasaku Senin's tone, it seems that Xianxia learned to control and even tame natural energy a long time ago. Watergate glanced at his sensei with a little reproach. He seemed to be complaining that his sensei didn't tell him such important information. Jiraiya, on the other hand, recovered from the grayish state and looked at Minato innocently. He seemed to want to tell Minato that he was the one who didn't ask him, but blamed him for not telling him. Before he had time to communicate with Jiraiya, Fukasaku Senin continued to talk, so Watergate could only focus his mind on Fukasaku Senin's words. Violent natural energy will greatly affect the human body. At the beginning of the violent natural energy, the human body will greatly transform into a toad. When the body completely transforms into a toad, the human will transform into a stone toad. You should have seen a lot of giant stone toads on your way here, right? Those are not decorations of our Mount Mayaboku, but the appearance of people who failed to cultivate Sage Mode in the long history. Jiraiya's Sage Mode is like an unfinished product. It can be said that it has surpassed most of the contractors of Mount Mayaboku who succeeded in cultivating Sage Mode. Watergate, are you ready to put your life on the balance and get Sage Mode? Fukasaku Senin's words were very serious. Obviously, he was not joking with Watergate. But such a danger did not make Watergate feel the slightest fear. As a ninja, Watergate has long been ready to put his life on the line. And for Watergate, cultivating Sage Mode is not only a means to improve his strength, but also a necessary means to better protect the Woodleaf, protect his family, and protect everything he cherishes. I'm ready. Even if there's a big chance that I will fail, I still have to learn Sage Mode. I need Immortal Mode. My family needs Immortal Mode. My village needs Immortal Mode. As the Hokage of the Woodleaf, isn't it too incompetent to retreat from such a risk? Watergate said this sentence, and he couldn't help but think of the first Hokage, second Hokage, and 3 generations Hokage who sacrificed their lives for the Woodleaf. After these 3 Hokages, Watergate also thought of the people who fought with Watergate or sacrificed their lives for the Woodleaf. These people all looked at him with a kind of expectation, encouraging him and encouraging him. How can he retreat like this? His firm eyes were also seen by Fukasaku Senin and Shima Senin. Watergate's eyes were not filled with ambition or a blind pursuit of power, but with the persistence of responsibility and the cherishing of cherished things. Only people with such beliefs are the most likely to succeed in cultivating Sage Mode. In this case, Fukasaku Senin and Shima Senin had no more questions, because Watergate's eyes were already the best answer. Taking Watergate to the edge of the pool where the toad oil was flowing, Fukasaku Senin put the toad oil on Watergate's forehead, and the Sage Mode cultivation officially began. When Jiraiya saw that Watergate had entered the Sage Mode cultivation under the care of Fukasaku Senin and Shima Senin, he also nodded to Fukasaku Senin and Shima Senin as a greeting and directly left Mount Mayaboku and returned to the Woodleaf village. Watergate entrusted the task of guarding the Woodleaf to Jiraiya. As the 4th Hokage's master, Jiraiya can't discredit his disciple. Chapter 468. After leaving Mount Mayaboku, Jiraiya has been looking forward to it. The great Toad Sage once prophesied that one of his disciples will become the Son of War, and the other will become the son of hope that will lead the ninja world to peace. Now it seems that the candidates of these two people may be completely determined. The son of war is the one who had been with him for 3 years in the rain country, Nagato, and the son of hope may be this with Leaf Fourth Hokage, Namake's Watergate. In Amage Cure, Nagato, who was regarded by Jiraiya as the son of war, was also looking at Pain's Six Paths clone standing in front of him with a serious face. After the last battle with his sensei, Jiraiya, 5 of his Six Paths clone were directly damaged, and almost all of them were damaged to varying degrees, except for Jigakudo. After emergency repair during this period of time, except for Chikashoto, which was attacked by Jiraiya's Senjutsu Kitan, which was completely destroyed, the other Six Paths clone were repaired. But at this moment, Nagato didn't have the mind to check the state of his Six Paths clone after the repair. Instead, he frowned as if thinking about something. During the time when he was concentrating on repairing his Six Paths clone, Conan also brought him some of the latest developments in the ninja world from time to time, as well as the movements of the masked man, Hoodlum, who claimed to be Uchiha Madara. When he heard that Itachi Uchiha died, Uchiha Sasuke joined the Akatsuki as a mercenary and was sent to capture the Hachibi column force of Kyumo Shinobu village. Nagato's heart was filled with anger. This guy was really too excessive. Akatsuki organization was his own organization and not Hoodlum's organization, casually sending his own members to their deaths and unscrupulously giving orders to the members of his organization. In the end, who gave Hoodlum this kind of authority? As the leader of an organization, the most unacceptable thing is to have someone challenge his position, even if this person is the one who led him step by step out of the Akatsuki's weak predicament. I heard that you were looking for me. In Nagato's room, a space vortex suddenly formed, and Hoodlum's figure slowly walked out of it. Of course, Hoodlum wasn't the only one who walked out. There was also a strange person whose face was wrapped in a huge pitcher plant. His face was half black and half white. Seeing Zetsu and Hoodlum appear together, Nagato wasn't surprised. After all, Hoodlum was the one who brought Zetsu to the organization. Although Zetsu's ability was very good and very useful for the organization, Nagato never regarded him as his confidant. Weren't Hoodlum and Hoodlum the same kind of people? That's right. I was indeed looking for you, mainly because I wanted to ask you a question. Nagato's tone was cold, but Hoodlum and Zetsu didn't seem to notice it. Hoodlum grinned and said to Nagato, "Oh. Our Akatsuki's god unexpectedly has a question to consult me. This really makes me flattered. Please tell me. I will answer you one by one." Obviously, these words were very gentlemanly, but when they came out of Hoodlum's mouth, they sounded full of sarcasm. Obviously, he called Nagato as God, but in his words, he regarded himself as the one who dominated the so-called God. Hearing Hoodlum's words, Nagato's originally cold face slowly faded, and a soft laughter came out of his mouth. He suddenly raised his head and stared at Hoodlum's mask with his Rinnegan full of circles and said, "What I want to ask is actually a very simple question. Is this Akatsuki organization mine, or is it Hoodlum's organization?" When Nagato shouted such a sentence, the Six Paths doppelgangers standing beside Nagato immediately moved, firmly surrounding Hoodlum and Zetsu. Pairs of ruthless and indifferent eyes swept past every vital point of Hoodlum and Hoodlum's body. It seemed that as long as Nagato willed it, the Six Paths doppelgangers would rush up and fight Hoodlum and Zetsu without fear of death. Hoodlum and Zetsu didn't care about the Six Path clones. What really made Hoodlum and Zetsu feel the danger was the skinny Nagato in front of them. As an outer path, Nagato was actually more dangerous than the Six Path clones. Obviously, Hoodlum was ready to fight, but he didn't look nervous at all. On the contrary, he was still so playful and still so calm. "Nagato, what you said is wrong. During this time, you have been repairing your Six Path clones. Although you can still get some necessary information, the situation of the Akatsuki isn't that simple. However, the situation in the shinobi world isn't something that can be explained with just a few pieces of information. Naturally, I can't disturb your progress in repairing the Six Paths clone, so I can only follow the strategy we made before. Now that you have recovered your strength, it's naturally not my turn to give orders. My leader, I don't know what your next plan is. Nagato's eyes were still coldly looking at Hoodlum standing in front of him. Looking at Hoodlum pretending to be a clown, Nagato's eyes flashed with killing intent. But soon his killing intent was forcibly suppressed by Nagato, because after Akatsuki's members died one after another, Akatsuki's high-end combat power was actually a bit lacking. If Zetsu and Hoodlum were left here, Akatsuki would only have himself, Konan, and Kisame. Even if Sasuke and Snake Squad were counted as mercenaries, it would be far from enough to complete his plan. Hoodlum was actually using the general trend and his obsession to complete the plan to create a kind of coercion, a coercion that he had to tolerate. Slowly waving his hand to let Six Path clones retreat, Nagato glanced at Hoodlum with his Rinnegan and said with a slightly cold tone, "Since you have sent Uchiha and Sasuke to capture Hachibi, then I will go to the Wood Leaf to meet Nine Tails Column Force. If everything goes well, I think our plan will be completed soon." Hearing that Nagato was going to the Wood Leaf, Hoodlum also slowly took a step forward and said to Nagato, "The Wood Leaf is different from other places. It's not so easy to invade. Now, there are 4 Kaga-level powerhouses in the Wood Leaf: Watergate, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Nangongjia. We must not underestimate them. Let me and Konan accompany you to capture Nine Tails Column Force." Chapter 469. Yo, you guys, you suddenly appeared. Hurry up and retreat. I'll let you go. Oh yeah. Looking at Sasuke and the other 3 members of the Snake Team who suddenly appeared in front of him, Killer Bee looked at Sasuke's group of 4 vigilantly. Although he said that as long as Sasuke's group retreated, he would let them go. But as a ninja, Killer Bee was still instinctively ready to fight. Before coming here to intercept Killer Bee, Sasuke's group also did some homework on Killer Bee's temperament. Although they knew that Killer Bee usually spoke with a sense of rap, when they really faced Killer Bee, they could really understand how noisy and unpleasant Killer Bee's rap was. Retreat? Of course, we will retreat, but we will take you with us. Suigetsu looked at Killer Bee, his eyes full of determination, but there was still some worry in Suigetsu's eyes. Although Suigetsu thinks that the strength of his group is very strong, his enemy is also not a weak guy. This is Hachibi Column Force, ranked 2nd among the 9-tailed beasts. And according to the information collected during this time, it is not difficult to know that Killer Bee is a ninja who can perfectly control his power as Hachibi Column Force. Such a person is not so easy to deal with, is he? After hearing Shuiyue's words, Killer Bee's expression turned solemn. Although Killer Bee didn't know these ninjas who suddenly appeared on the road to intercept him, the uniforms on their bodies were enough to make Killer Bee serious. You know, another Hachibi Column Force of Kyumo, Shinobu Village, Nibi Column Force Yujito Nibi, was forcibly abducted by Akatsuki not long ago, and her life and death are still unknown. Judging from all the information collected, Akatsuki is working hard to collect bijou, so Yujito Nibi is naturally in danger. Although the tailed beast inside Yukito's body is only Nibi, but its strength is also quite good. Such a ninja was captured by Akatsuki's people without any resistance. It is enough to see how difficult Akatsuki's people are. Moreover, he is Hachibi Column Force. As long as Akatsuki is not confused, they will definitely send more powerful forces to surround him. Yo, you bastards, you idiots. I just came out for a walk, but I accidentally had to fight. Although I don't like it very much, I will do my best. Open your eyes carefully and look at my light. Oh yeah, since the other party was ready to fight, Killer Bee did not hesitate at all. He immediately made up his mind to open up a path of blood. From the moment he was surrounded, Killer Bee has been carefully observing the 4 ninjas opposite him. And Hachibi, in Killer Bee's body, is also constantly perceiving the foundation of the enemy opposite him through his ability. Although he doesn't know what ability these enemies have, chakra, which is obviously different from ordinary people, has already told Killer Bee and Hachibi that the four people opposite him all have Kekkei Genkai. In a ninja world, although there are strong and weak Kekkei Genkai, ninjas who can cultivate to Jonin or even more powerful level must be people who have mastered the power in their body. Even if their Kekkei Genkai is very weak, under the continuous accumulation of combat awareness and combat experience, no matter how weak and useless their Kekkei Genkai is, they can't ignore it. Otherwise, they will definitely suffer a big loss. This is one of the experiences that Killer Bee has obtained after almost completely experiencing the Third Ninja World War and completing countless difficult tasks. The moment they saw Killer Bee pull out his sword, Yugo and Kuroto also acted. Yugo's body was instantly covered with black runes, and the natural energy that filled the natural world constantly poured into Yugo's body. The violent killing intent instantly filled Yugo's spiritual world. His originally dull face has become ferocious at this moment, and a cold and uncomfortable aura slowly rose from Yugo's body. With a slight struggle in his eyes, Yugo looked back at Sasuke standing beside him, and Sasuke also looked at Yugo quietly. Even though he didn't say anything, Zhongwu's discomfort from the intense killing intent that was assaulting his nerves slowly disappeared. Yugo's left arm began to change constantly, and huge barbs appeared on Yugo's arm. A primitive aura, as if from ancient times, gushed out from Yugo's body. If you must find a word to describe Yugo at this moment, perhaps only power is the most appropriate word. It's the most simple feeling of power. Crystal Release, Crystal Shuriken. After seeing that Yugo had controlled his killing intent, Kuroto also quickly formed hand seals with a tacit understanding. Pink crystals were constantly produced. Under Kuroto's control, the shuriken-like crystals rushed towards Killer Bee at an extremely fast speed. Sure enough, he's the holder of Kekkei Genkai. After seeing the changes in Yugo's body and Kuroto's special ability, Killer Bee also confirmed his judgment. One is a Kekkei Genkai that acts on the body, and the other is a Kekkei Genkai that acts on the release technique. Be careful. That kid whose body has changed is not simple. I smell a trace of Senin's aura on him. Hachibi, who was sealed in Killer Bee's body, reminded Killer Bee in a timely manner. Hachibi, who once lived with Hagoromo Sannin, knew how powerful Sannin chakra is better than anyone else. Yo, don't worry at all. I'm ready. Sit quietly by the side and watch me shine. Oh yeah. Even though he was talking to the Hachibi in his body, Killer Bee still spoke in a strange tone. And Hachibi seems to be used to calm Force's personality. Although there was a bit of helplessness on his face, he didn't do anything special. Waving the ninja sword in his hand, Killer Bee easily split and blocked the shuriken that was shot towards him one by one. Immediately after Kuroto's shuriken, Yugo was very close to Killer Bee's side. Yugo's timing was very good. Killer Bee, who was holding two swords, had just blocked the last two shuriken, and there was a little gap in his body. The punch that Zhong had been accumulating power for a long time was thrown out, and judging from the wind and the sound of friction between the fist and the air, this punch was definitely not easy to receive. Chapter 470. But Killer Bee isn't a person who only uses two swords. When he found that he couldn't use his hands to defend himself, Killer Bee immediately used his chakra to activate a seal on his ankle. The moment the seal was activated, a long sword suddenly appeared next to his ankle. He used the tip of his foot to gently lift the hilt of the long saber. With sharp eyes and agile hands, he clamped the long saber between his leg socket. He injected the right unchakra from his body into the long blade that was clamped between his legs. The long blade constantly moved around the lightning chakra, and at the same time, the long blade also began to vibrate at a high frequency. Lightning ninjutsu, supersonic thunder vibration release. The leg that wasn't holding the saber suddenly exerted force. Killer Bee's entire body assumed a strange posture as he rushed towards Yugo, who was clearly attacking him. Originally, Red Lotus saw Killer Bee summon the long sword, and also seemed to use a powerful ninjutsu. Red Lotus, who was preparing to use Crystal Release to harass Killer Bee, quickly stopped making hand seals. After all, she was now mainly a long-range attacker, and most of the ninjutsu she used were AoE ninjutsu. With the current distance between Killer Bee and Yugo, Red Lotus knew that Yugo would be affected, so she didn't dare to make a move. Although Red Lotus usually doesn't respect her teammates when she talks to them, it's just her personality. In fact, Red Lotus still cherishes her teammates very much. It's because of this that Killer Bee was given a chance. Under the influence of inertia, Yugo had no way of changing the direction of his punch. He could only use his deformed left fist to smash directly into the lightning saber. Supersonic Thunder Vibration Release uses the power of lightning release to act on the long sword. So the long sword has the ability to paralyze lightning and also has a strong cutting ability. However, because Killer Bee used the blade of his long sword to block Yugo's punch, it played a certain defensive role. The lightning on the long sword invaded Yugo's body the moment it touched him. Because the amount of lightning was too large, it directly began to destroy the muscle tissue and tendons of Yugo's left arm. So Yugo couldn't increase the power of his fist by releasing more chakra. The huge power that originally carried by the fist was constantly reduced under the high-frequency vibration of a long sword, and the power that really affected the long sword in Killer Bee's body has been greatly reduced. Perceiving that Yugo's body has gradually adapted to the paralysis caused by the lightning, Killer Bee directly raised his leg and threw the long sword in the air. Then he bit the handle of the sword with his mouth and used his leg to kick Yugo's body fiercely, directly pulling away from Yugo. Releasing lightning release chakra from his leg socket actually has a certain degree of pressure on Killer Bee's mind and body. Just like now, after Killer Bee stood still, his left leg, which was originally holding the long sword, trembled slightly. Just when Killer Bee was about to adjust his state and launch another attack, a thick fog was quietly produced. Water release, mist concealment technique. The place where Sasuke's team intercepted Killer Bee was relatively near a relatively high mountain, so there was a little fog due to the high altitude. Under the combined effect of the natural fog and the fog produced after the use of mist concealment technique, the mist concealment technique used by Suigetsu became more difficult to see through. After Killer Bee noticed that he was shrouded in the mist concealment technique, he also took out all his 7 long swords very cautiously. There were 2 long swords under his armpit and arm socket respectively, a long sword in his mouth, a long sword in his abdomen, and a long sword in his leg socket. Obviously, Killer Bee also became more cautious after experiencing the attack of Red Lotus and Yugo. Although he was wearing sunglasses, his constantly turning head clearly showed Killer Bee's serious attitude. Suigetsu's brother, Hozuki Mangetsu, was not only the user of the double sword of the Mist 7 swords, but also the user of the other 6 swords. Although Hozuki Mangetsu was dead, he left some of his methods of using the remaining 6 swords, so he also mentioned a method of using the broken sword, Zanpakuto. Suigetsu's figure has quietly appeared behind Killer Bee. The Zanpakuto was raised high and was about to slash down on Killer Bee, but Killer Bee still didn't notice. Suigetsu's face slowly showed a smile, but Sasuke, who stood aside and didn't participate in the battle, began to slowly mobilize chakra in his body. Sasuke had seen Zabuza, the original Zanpakuto wielder, use silent assassination jutsu, so it was very easy to discover the shortcomings of Suigetsu's slightly shoddy assassination jutsu. For Killer Bee, Hachibi Column Force, Sasuke was still full of vigilance, so Sasuke mobilized his chakra at this moment to save Suigetsu if something went wrong. Sure enough, just when the Zanpakuto was about to attack Killer Bee's face with his back to Suigetsu showed a smile of success. Killer Bee's perception ability was indeed not very strong, but there was a Hachibi in Killer Bee's body that could be said to be born from chakra. Although he used silent assassination jutsu, Suigetsu didn't perfectly hide his chakra aura. At the moment when Suigetsu approached Killer Bee, Hachibi had already informed his man column force. Although it seems that Killer Bee is a careless person, we can't completely ignore Killer Bee's combat experience. He is now in a 1 versus 4 situation. As long as the other party is ready to start fighting with him, then the probability of Killer Bee's defeat is still very high. Therefore, for Killer Bee, there are only 2 choices. Either he tries his best to break through the encirclement of Sasuke's team and escape smoothly, or he concentrates his strength and starts to defeat the members of Sasuke's team one by one. Obviously, Killer Bee, who has his own pride, didn't choose the first option, escape, but began to look for opportunities to defeat the members of Sasuke's team one by one. And Suigetsu, who was already standing behind him and was discovered by him, isn't he the best target? Chapter 471. The powerful and violent Bijou chakra instantly covered Killer Bee's body, and under the joint control of Killer Bee and Hachibi, Killer Bee's body did not transform into Naruto's Yanbi mode. Killer Bee's body was now only partially Bijou, and the Bijou transformation was very complete. A huge octopus tentacle rushed out from behind Killer Bee. Suigetsu, who couldn't react in time, was directly wrapped in the huge octopus tentacle, struggling hard but to no avail. Killer Bee could naturally perceive that his octopus tentacle had captured the target, so lightning surged all over his body, stimulating his physical ability through lightning. Raidan Ninjutsu, Baron Egret Blade. The original Baron Egret Blade was a pure blade technique without using Bijou Chakra and Right-Un Chakra to stimulate the body to enhance the power. But in order to speed up the battle process, Killer Bee used Bijou mode and Right-Un Chakra on his blade technique at the same time. The 7 blades that Killer Bee used at that time were now ready to attack. After a slight accumulation of power, the 7 blades on Killer Bee's body moved at the same time. Without removing the huge octopus tentacle wrapped around Suigetsu, the blade light directly slashed on the octopus tentacle, but there was no stagnation after being hindered at all. The huge octopus tentacle condensed by Hachibi's Bijou Chakra was so fragile under Killer Bee's blade light. After a dozen or 20 slashes, Shuei-Yu, who had been trapped in the octopus tentacles and seemed to be unable to move, suddenly turned into a pool of water and escaped through the gaps of the octopus tentacles. What Suigetsu used was the Kekkei Jinkai of Hozuki clan. Seeing that Suigetsu had escaped from the bondage, Sasuke not only did not stop the chakra in his body, but also quickly printed. A ninjutsu was quickly completed in Sasuke's hand, and he held his hand in front of his mouth. Katan, Dragon Fire Jutsu. A B-class ninjutsu was released by Sasuke, but it was not launched toward Killer Bee, but flew toward the sky. Suigetsu, Red Lotus, and Yugo immediately moved after discovering that Sasuke used fire release ninjutsu towards the sky. Suigetsu quickly lifted the mist concealment jutsu he just cast, and Yugo quickly distanced himself from Killer Bee. Looking at Killer Bee, Red Lotus quickly formed hand seals, and a ninjutsu was completed in an instant. Crystal Release. 8 crystal walls formation. Huge pink crystal pillars stretched out from the ground. A total of 8 crystal pillars trapped Killer Bee in the middle. Killer Bee, who had just used his octopus tentacles to trap others, was now trapped by someone else. When he found that he was trapped, and Sasuke's 3 companions also distanced themselves from him one by one, Killer Bee's heart inevitably felt a sense of crisis. The strong sense of crisis made Killer Bee immediately begin to communicate with Hachibi in his body. A large number of Bijou Chakra was released by Hachibi, and Killer Bee's body gradually began to deform. One tail after another emerged from Killer Bee's back. 1 tail, 2 tails, 3 tails, 6 tails. With the continuous release of the Bijou Chakra, Killer Bee's body slowly swelled up. Cracks also began to slowly appear on the crystal walls of 8 crystal walls formation. The hastily used 8 crystal walls formation was slowly overwhelmed under the impact of Column Force, who had released Rokubi mode. Red Lotus was naturally the person who knew the state of the crystal walls. With a little anxiety and tension, Red Lotus looked at Sasuke. Sasuke didn't have any intention to respond to Red Lotus's gaze at this moment. His eyes, which had become three Tomo state, stared at the huge black cloud formed in the sky with constant electric currents surging in it. His hand quickly printed, and the highly compressed lightning chakra was formed in Sasuke's hand. He stabbed the lightning in his hand into the black thundercloud in the sky in the form of Chidori Einerjar. Because of the stimulation of the external lightning, the lightning in the black thundercloud became more violent. Feeling the changes in the thundercloud, Sasuke's eyes finally turned to Killer Bee's Bijou state, who was about to struggle out of the crystal wall. Divine Beast Patrol, Kamui descend. Right on Kirin. That's right. After seeing Nangongja summon Beast Ryo's appearance in the sky, Sasuke developed a ninjutsu that used huge lightning power to attack the enemy. After this period of practice and research, Sasuke finally displayed the most powerful ninjutsu he could master now. Under the guidance of Chidori Einerjar, the lightning in the black thundercloud was drawn out. A slightly abstract Kirin stood in the air, just like what Sasuke said just now. Divine Beast Patrol, Kamui descend. The Cheelant's eyes swept across everyone on the ground mercilessly, as if a real mythical beast had descended upon them. Finally, Kirin put his eyes on Killer Bee, who was constantly releasing Bija Chakra to break free from the crystal wall. A trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. It was strange that chakra and lightning condensed, but its eyes had emotions. Tear it apart. Kirin. Sasuke waved his hand fiercely, and as if he had received an order, Kirin jumped high. It rushed in the direction of Killer Bee like a predator. Although it was huge, it was extremely fast. Kirin almost hit Killer Bee's body in an instant. Whether it was the crystal wall that trapped Killer Bee or Killer Bee itself, they were directly submerged in the sea of lightning. Thunder and lightning continued to wreak havoc on the ground, and the ground was scorched black under the effect of the thunder and lightning. The thunderstorm-like scene lasted for nearly 10 minutes. No matter what kind of life it was, it would be difficult to survive such an attack, right? Feeling that the time was almost up, Sasuke also slowly dispersed the Chidori sharp spear in his hand. Although casting Kirin mainly relied on the natural lightning in nature, Sasuke still needed to consume a lot of energy to control Kirin's attack range. After 10 minutes, Sasuke's chakra was almost exhausted. When Sasuke withdrew the lightning, a feeling of weakness swept through Sasuke's body. Chapter 472. Seeing that Sasuke was obviously exhausted, Red Lotus and Yugo hurriedly wanted to run to Sasuke's side to support him. But Sasuke stopped his teammates' actions with a look. After all, it was still impossible to judge whether the enemy really lost his ability to move. So everything must be done with a mission. Red Lotus and Yugo naturally had a tacit understanding with Sasuke. They knew that Sasuke didn't want to be supported, so they had to slowly advance in the direction of Killer Bee with Suigetsu in a triangular state. All three of them maintained a vigilant state. After all, Column Force was different from ordinary ninja. After such an attack, ordinary ninja must have lost the ability to resist, but Column Force had resistance and recovery ability far beyond ordinary people. Now is not the time to take it lightly. Slowly approaching the position where Killer Bee was standing, Suigetsu, Yugo, and Red Lotus movements also became slower and slower. Without Sasuke's support, Killer Bee could only rely on the three of them if he still had the power to resist. In such a case, no matter how cautious they were, it was not too much. They exchanged glances with each other, and the three of them were finally less than half a meter away from Killer Bee's direction. Killer Bee's current state looked extremely miserable. There were many traces of being burned by lightning on his dark skin. Because of the Bijou transformation, Killer Bee's skin also showed an extremely strange dark red color. Water release, water iron cannon, second ding. Suigetsu pinched his hand into a gun shape and a small group of water iron cannon was condensing on his 2 index fingers. Feeling that the water pressure had reached a certain limit, Suigetsu controlled the small water iron cannon at his fingertips to shoot at Killer Bee's body. Just after the water iron cannon at his fingertips was shot out, 2 more water iron cannon condensed between Suigetsu's fingers. Almost continuously, Shueiwa had already shot out 6 water iron cannons. 2 hit Killer Bee's shoulder, 2 hit Killer Bee's crotch, and 2 hit Killer Bee's knee. The water iron cannon became extremely penetrating due to Suigetsu's accumulation. It almost instantly penetrated Killer Bee's body on the ground. Looking at his 2 teammates, Water Moon nodded, indicating that his teammate Killer Bee has lost the ability to resist. So Red Lotus's hand began to form hand seals, and a half-sealing technique and half-ninjutsu was quickly completed. In order to increase the power and hardness of the ninjutsu she cast, Kuroto used almost 3 times the amount of chakra she would normally use to cast such ninjutsu. Crystal Escape, Red Fruit, Change. It was originally a ninjutsu used for self-defense, but under the deliberate control of Red Lotus, it became a ninjutsu with internal defense far stronger than external defense. Killer Bee's body was firmly sealed in the pink crystal. Yugo took out a sealing scroll that he had prepared beforehand. Killer Bee's body, which had become even larger after being wrapped in the red fruit, was sealed within the scroll. After finishing all the operations, Red Lotus, Yugo, and Suigetsu finally came to Sasuke, who was almost sitting on the ground. Although they didn't say anything, the concern in their eyes was so obvious. Mission completed. It's time for us to go back. Using the long sword in his hand as a support point, Sasuke stood up with a little difficulty. Looking at the scroll in Yugo's hand, Sasuke nodded and issued his order. Turning around, Sasuke was just about to leave, but Suigetsu stopped in front of Sasuke, looking like he had something to say, but didn't know how to say it. For his teammates, Sasuke has already regarded them as people he needs to cherish, so when he saw Suigetsu's hesitant look, Sasuke was not unhappy, but he said to Suigetsu with a little doubt, "What are you talking about? What's wrong, Suigetsu? Do you have something to say?" Hearing Sasuke's question, Suigetsu could only take a deep breath, as if to stabilize his emotions, and said to Sasuke, "Is what we are doing right now really right?" Very unusually, Suigetsu didn't show his usual rascal look this time, but looked at Sasuke with some seriousness. Obviously, this question has been in Suigetsu's heart for a long time. Before meeting with Hoodlum, Sasuke said to his 3 teammates that joining Akatsuki this time was actually to explore Akatsuki's intelligence as much as possible, and then find a way to destroy Akatsuki's plan. Originally, they thought that although they seemed to be dealing with Hachibi column force this time, as long as they didn't put in any effort, it would be better to make the appearance of defeat more realistic. On the one hand, this can save their own lives, and on the other hand, it can also be regarded as an indirect hindrance to Akatsuki's plan. But in the heat of the battle, Sasuke directly used his strongest ninjutsu. In this case, Red Lotus, Yugo, and Suigetsu couldn't go easy on them. After a battle, they actually caught Hachibi column force. Although they don't know how many bijou has been collected by Akatsuki, now that they have set their sights on the powerful Hachibi, doesn't it prove that Akatsuki has actually collected a lot of bijou? Their current behavior doesn't seem to be hindering Akatsuki's plan at all. Instead, it feels like they are helping the evildoers. Hearing Suigetsu's words, Sasuke naturally couldn't pretend that he didn't hear it. So after clearing his throat a little and adjusting his thoughts, Sasuke asked Suigetsu, "What do you think?" "Suigetsu, let's not talk about whether what we are doing now is helping the evildoers. I want to ask you a question first. What kind of people do you think Akatsuki's people are?" Although Suigetsu had some doubts, since it was a question asked by Sasuke, Suigetsu naturally couldn't ignore it directly. So Suigetsu could only search for all the information he knew about Akatsuki, carefully thinking about Sasuke's question, and then said to Sasuke, "They're a group of lunatics with powerful strength and paranoid thinking." Trying hard to compare the information he knew with the vocabulary in his mind, Suigetsu found that it seems that only lunatics are suitable for Akatsuki's members. Isn't it a group of lunatics who attempt to subvert the ninja world and make the ninja world break out the largest battle? Indeed, they are a group of lunatics. Hearing Suigetsu's words, Sasuke slowly nodded, but then turned to Suigetsu and said, "But they're not only a group of lunatics. Such a group of lunatics is not only powerful, but also ruthless. So they also have intelligence beyond ordinary people. If we don't work hard, if we perfunctorily perform the task they give us, do you think they won't find out with their intelligence? These people's goal is the nine-tailed beasts. Even if we really help them collect the eight-tailed beasts, so what? As long as the last-tailed beast is missing, their plan will not be successful. In Nine Tails, I believe they will have no way to get it." For some reason, when talking about Nine Tails, Sasuke's eyes suddenly flashed with a ray of confidence. Sasuke believes in Wood Leaf, believes in Nangong-ja, and believes in the blonde boy who has the most dazzling smile since childhood. Chapter 473. Ah! What the hell is this? Jiraiya looked at the 3-centimeter thick stack of documents in his hand. The veins on his face were bulging. It looked like he wanted to tear the documents in his hand into pieces. However, Jiraiya didn't dare to tear this document to shreds as he thought, because this document involved many conflicts between clans in Konoha, big and small. These things need to be coordinated by Hokage. Now that Watergate is practicing Sage Mode in Mount Myaboku, and the qualifications of the Shadow Clone Jutsu in Narashikaku are not enough to convince these conservative clans. This kind of thing can only fall on Jiraiya and Tsunade. Such a thing involving all kinds of interests is like a mess in front of Jiraiya, and his wife Tsunade is dealing with another thing with Shizun. So when Jiraiya just got the document, he didn't ask Tsunade to help him look at it. Finally, he couldn't hold back the anxiety in his heart and shouted at the ceiling. Shizun raised her head and looked at Jiraiya, who was roaring towards the sky. She took out a small notebook from her arms and gently drew an ink mark on it. Looking at the small notebook in Shizun's hand, it's not difficult to see that there are several pages of densely drawn letters on it. Obviously, as long as Jiraiya has such an uncontrollable emotion, it will be recorded by Shizun. Maybe this is something Shizun does to comfort him when he's bored. Hearing Jiraiya's wail, Tsunade can only put down the document in her hand and slowly walked to Jiraiya's side. She skillfully took the document in Jiraiya's hand, used a pen in her hand to slightly organize the information inside from time to time, and then returned the document in her hand to Jiraiya. Tsunade has watched her two grandfathers deal with public affairs since she was a child, and when she grew up, she would occasionally help her teacher, 3 generations Hokage, deal with some less important public affairs. Tsunade was actually very clear about the process. Although dealing with the affairs of Wood Leaf Village like this was a little more difficult for Tsunade, it was still within her ability. I really admire Watergate. He can deal with such bullshit things one by one patiently. Shaking the document in his hand, Jiraiya said to Tsunade with a little admiration. After hearing Jiraiya's sigh, Tsunade also nodded. Indeed, being the Hokage is not only an honor, but also an important duty. Wood Leaf Village needs the Hokage's help to solve all the big and small matters. So in fact, after becoming the Hokage, it is no different from contributing everything to the Wood Leaf Village. If you don't really sit in the position of Hokage, you can't understand how heavy the responsibility of such a title is. Speaking of this, Tsunade couldn't help but think of her grandfather who died young, her second grandfather who died in the war, and her teacher. These people are worthy of the respect of every Wood Leaf ninja and civilians. In order to maintain the current stability of Wood Leaf, there are countless people, whether in the light or in the dark, sacrificing their blood and their lives. Just as Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Shizun sighed together about the duties and obligations of Hokage, a figure quietly appeared in the sky of Wood Leaf. Wearing the uniform of the Akatsuki with a black background and red clouds, Pain, with orange hair, was overlooking the panoramic view of Wood Leaf like a god at the moment. With Rinnegan, Payne's vision was naturally very strong. Although he was high in the sky, the scene inside Wood Leaf could still be seen very clearly. The pedestrians and ninjas coming and going in the streets of Wood Leaf naturally had no way to find a powerful ninja with sage eyes suddenly appeared above their heads. They were still busy with their own things. But these people all had something in common. Their faces were filled with happy smiles. They were happy that they lived in Wood Leaf, and they were happy that they could fight for their dreams. Wood Leaf. Payne looked at Wood Leaf. Although his eyes were cold, there was a hint of hope and envy. In a war-filled ninja world, only Wood Leaf can maintain such peace and calmness. Such a life is worthy of envy. But the people who have such a life also have to bear the same sin. It is a sin to enjoy such a life alone. I, Payne, as a god walking in the world, judge you guilty. Payne slowly opened his hands, and chakra continued to condense in Payne's hands. A little black halo slowly formed in Payne's palms. If Jiraiya was here, he would definitely find that Payne was using his unique ability called Shinra Tensei at this moment. But at this moment, the chakra condensed in Payne's body was far more powerful than the Shinra Tensei that Jiraiya had experienced before. Now, the large number of chakra condensed in Payne's hands has proved that this Shinra Tensei will have far more power than before. Konoha has a defensive enchantment around it. As a village's guard enchantment, Konoha's enchantment naturally has various functions, and the detection of chakra is naturally one of the functions that can't be ignored. When Payne was suspended in the sky, because the amount of chakra used was very small, it was difficult to detect. But when Payne began to gather power for his Shinra Tensei, Wood Leaf's barrier squad immediately discovered the abnormality in the sky above the Wood Leaf. According to the barrier squad's rules, such a powerful source of chakra suddenly appeared near the Wood Leaf must be directly transmitted to the Hokage's office unconditionally. So when Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Shizun had been dealing with official business, an Umbu directly under Watergate appeared directly in the Hokage's office. Reporting to several lords, a huge energy source appeared above the Wood Leaf. The barrier squad requests to immediately send summoned beast and ninja to investigate. Hearing the words of the Umbu, Jiraiya also immediately focused on detecting the huge energy source in the mouth of the Umbu. The familiar aura of chakra directly made Jiraiya fall into a sluggish state, and Jiraiya could only murmur, "Is here?" Chapter 474. This familiar chakra was so familiar to Jiraiya. This chakra belonged to his disciple son of war, Uzumaki Nagato, or Pain Rikudo. The moment he felt this chakra, Jiraiya's face was gloomy. Jiraiya, who had always been very frivolous, suddenly showed such a serious look. Whether it was Tsunade or Shizun, they couldn't help but be serious. Being able to make Jiraiya so serious, didn't it prove that the person who was detected was a very bad guy? Jiraiya? Who is he? Tsunade walked to Jiraiya's side and put her hand on Jiraiya's shoulder. She seemed to want Jiraiya to explain a little for her. But Jiraiya knew that now was not the time to explain to his wife one by one. He just took a step forward and stood in front of the Umbu who delivered the information for him. "Umbu of Hokage, listen to my order." Jiraiya suddenly ordered the Umbu. "No, it should be the Umbu of Hokage." Speaking of which, this was actually a bit excessive for Jiraiya's identity, but now was not the time to care about such things. Obviously, the Umbu was also affected by Jiraiya's serious face. He bowed his head very respectfully and said seriously to Jiraiya, "Umbu of Hokage, listen to my order." After a little hesitation, Jiraiya finally gave the order. From now on, Wood Leaf Village will enter the highest level of combat readiness. All the ninjas and Umbu in Konoha now began to act, guiding the civilians in Konoha and the children in the ninja school. Do everything possible to guide them all to a safe place and preserve the fire for Wood Leaf Village. Our enemy this time is unusual. It is likely to be a full-scale invasion by the Akatsuki. So I hope the Umbu will do their best to guard the Nine Tails, Column Force, and Uzumaki Naruto. No, Tsunade, I hope you can guard Uzumaki Naruto directly. In case of any emergency, directly take Uzumaki Naruto away from Woodleaf through reverse summoning and go to Shikatsu Forest to seek the protection of Katsuyu. When they heard the term highest level of combat readiness from Jiraiya's mouth, Hokage's Umbu, who was kneeling beside Jiraiya, and Tsunade, who was standing beside Jiraiya, also became serious. Only Shizune, who had been traveling with Tsunade all year round, was a little confused, but now was not the time to answer Shizune's questions. The highest level of combat readiness means that Woodleaf Village has faced with the threat of direct extermination. Everyone can only choose to fight to the death and fight to keep the fire of Woodleaf. When she heard Jiraiya's order to protect Uzumaki Naruto, Tsunade knew that Jiraiya was ready to face the upcoming enemy by herself. After years of fighting together, Tsunade has understood Jiraiya's character. Making such a decision proves that Jiraiya is ready to fight to the death. But as a ninja from Woodleaf Village, Tsunade's love for Woodleaf is not inferior to anyone. So even if she was reluctant to leave Tsunade, she still didn't say anything to refuse. After confirming all the orders from Jiraiya, the Umbu directly disappeared from Hokage's office. Apparently, he went to convey Jiraiya's orders. After all, Woodleaf Ninja Village is an organization responsible for war. When encountering special situations, their response is very poor. From the time the Umbu left Hokage's office to the time the whole village acted, it was only a minute or two. Be sure to live, promise me. Tsunade stood beside Jiraiya and said to him very seriously. After decades of getting along, the feelings between Jiraiya and Tsunade are difficult for ordinary people to understand. Even a reason why Tsunade has been unwilling to accept Jiraiya before is partly because the feelings between the two of them are so deep that Tsunade is reluctant to let any unpredictable changes happen between the two of them. In the face of life and death, all the disguises are taken off. In Tsunade's eyes, there's only deep love and inseparable attachment to Jiraiya. Such emotions were naturally seen by Jiraiya. He reached out and held Tsunade's hand tightly. Jiraiya said to Tsunade seriously, "Don't worry, I will come back. I still have so many agreements with you, and I still owe you so many promises. If I just let go." Before Jiraiya finished speaking, Tsunade directly pressed his mouth. Tsunade shook her head. Obviously, she didn't want Jiraiya to say anything bad before the war begins. Understanding Tsunade's meaning, Jiraiya slowly shook his head, took Tsunade's hand off his mouth, didn't speak, just nodded very seriously. At this moment, all words seemed to have become pale. The two of them only looked at each other for a long time. Finally, Jiraiya forced himself out of this atmosphere and said to Tsunade very seriously, "The goal of Akatsuki is the Bijou, so you must protect Shinakushina and Naruto. Now that Watergate is training in Mount Mayaboku, the responsibility of protecting Shinakushina and Naruto falls on us. Remember what I said, if something goes wrong, you must take Naruto and Shinakushina to the Shikatsu Forest. Woodleaf being destroyed is not as serious as Naruto being kidnapped." Although Jiraiya wasn't so clear about Akatsuki's specific plan, when he fought with Pain before, from Pain's words, Jiraiya naturally analyzed that Akatsuki wanted to gather all 9 Bijou and use them as a weapon to threaten the whole world. This situation is definitely more unacceptable to Jiraiya than Woodleaf being destroyed. "I understand. I'll go now." Tsunade opened the window of Hokage's office, jumped out of the window, and rushed to Watergate's house. Shizune naturally heard the order Jiraiya just issued to Umbu and followed Tsunade's footsteps out of Hokage's office, but she didn't go to Watergate's house. Instead, she went to Kiba Hospital to prepare to follow the medical ninjas of Kiba Hospital. Looking at the empty Hokage's office, Jiraiya bit his tongue and quickly used summoning jutsu to summon Fukasaku Sanin to his side. Fukasaku's Sunin was suddenly summoned by Jiraiya, and he didn't know why, but Fukasaku Sunin, who is Chakra Sunin, naturally has extremely powerful perception. The huge and familiar chakra above the wood leaf was naturally easily detected by Fukasaku Sunin. Little Jiraiya, it seems that our last action was a bit useless. This emotion made Fukasaku Sunin feel very uncomfortable. Little Jiraiya, remember my words? Don't be so desperate. As long as you can delay long enough, there is still a chance to turn the tables. Don't give up your life so easily. Do you understand what I mean? Fukasaku Sunin looked at Jiraiya very seriously. From the bottom of his heart, Fukasaku Sunin didn't want Jiraiya to sacrifice himself. So before leaving, Fukasaku Sunin still told Jiraiya not to give up his life easily. Watching Fukasaku Sunin turn into a cloud of smoke and disappear in front of him, Jiraiya was just about to move to seal Watergate's shadow clone in Woodleaf, so that Watergate couldn't get the information that Woodleaf was invaded, but a strong vibration suddenly appeared. Pain, who was suspended in the air, looked down at Konoha under his feet as if he was looking down at ants. He opened his hands and embraced the whole sky like a god embracing the world. With a tone of indifference and undeniable majesty, a short word came out from Pain's mouth. Super Shinra Tensei. Directly below Pain, a powerful repulsive force was generated on the ground. It was like a heavy hammer constantly hitting everything around him, whether it was the ground or the buildings. They were constantly smashed and then pushed by the repulsive force. A torrent formed by the wreckage of the houses and the soil suddenly appeared. The pit on the ground became bigger and bigger, and the range with leaf destruction also became larger and larger. The strong vibration that Jiraiya just felt came from Pain's ninjutsu, Super Shinra Tensei, which was beyond common sense. Jiraiya immediately escaped from the building where Hokage's office was located and jumped a few times to the shadow rock at the commanding height of Woodleaf. Looking at the huge attack range that seemed to be constantly expanding, Jiraiya only felt his heart trembling. This is the place where he grew up. Although he left for many years, some changes have happened in many places. But when Jiraiya walked on Woodleaf, he always felt a familiar feeling. Woodleaf is his home, but his home was directly reduced to such a broken state under the attack of others. A flame full of anger and sadness burned in Jiraiya's heart, making Jiraiya's hatred for Akatsuki and Pain become stronger. They have touched one of the biggest taboos in Jiraiya's heart. At this moment, Jiraiya had no intention of blocking the news from Watergate and helping with Leaf Ninja Rescue. Jiraiya just wanted to find Pain quickly and use his fist and ninjutsu to let Pain know how fierce the flame in his heart was. Burn Pain's body with the fire of his heart. Pain, who was floating in the sky, seemed to feel that his ninjutsu had caused enough effect. Although he could more than double the attack range, this was not Pain's purpose. Capturing the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki is the real purpose of invading Konoha. Before that, he must ensure that he has enough power to fight against the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki or the Kyuubi's own power. So Pain manipulated the gravity to let his figure fall slowly. After a while, he was already standing on the ground that had been destroyed and turned into ruins. Chapter 476. Looking at the ruins in front of him, Naruto couldn't react in time. Just a moment ago, everything was so normal. He stayed at home and chatted with his mother casually. But suddenly, a violent vibration came from the ground. Lascivious Sage's wife, Tsunade, suddenly appeared in his house, and without any explanation, she took his mother and himself to the periphery of Konoha. Behind them, the torrent formed by the ruins spread like a tide. His house and the familiar streets around his house were destroyed in an instant. On the way to evacuate, Naruto saw many of his neighbors were crushed under the ruins. Naruto knew that his neighbors were ordinary people, and it was impossible for them to get out of the huge concrete slabs. How Naruto wished he could help his weak neighbors out of their predicament. But when Naruto was about to take action, he was stopped by his mother and Tsunade at the same time. If it was according to Naruto's usual character, no matter who stopped him, Naruto would definitely save those who needed to be saved. But maybe it's the terrifying scene that suddenly appeared in front of him, or maybe it's the serious look of his mother and Tsunade, or maybe it's the fear in his heart that can't be dispelled. Naruto can only run around like a mouse, trying to survive. He doesn't know what's going on, but Naruto can only run around like a mouse, trying to survive. Shina Kushina, I will send you and Naruto to the Shikatsu forest. Katsuki will be responsible for the safety of the two of you. Now, for with Leaf, these buildings, these ninjas aren't as important as the two of you. You must ensure your own safety. Do you understand what I mean? Tsunade looked at Shinakushina and said seriously. When Tsunade said Naruto's name, Shinakushina dug out some important information that Watergate occasionally revealed to her. Akatsuki Organization, such an organization that had their eyes on his wife and his children. Even if Minato paid attention to secrecy, he still intentionally or unintentionally revealed a lot of relevant information about this kind of matter that was closely related to his family. Don't worry, Tsunade-sama. Now, that Watergate is not in the village. The task of protecting the village can only be handed over to you and Jiraiya-sensei. Please pay attention to your own safety. Otherwise, I don't know how much Minato will blame himself when he returns. Tsunade glanced at Shinakushina and didn't say anything. She just nodded her head gently, but didn't give any promise to Shinakushina. Shinakushina also seemed to be aware of her slip of the tongue. After all, it was an important period for Wood Leaf to resist the foreign enemy, so it was indeed inappropriate for her to say such willful words. In silence, Tsunade quickly printed hand seals, and the reverse summoning technique was quickly completed. After a burst of smoke, Naruto and Shinakushina disappeared. Tsunade looked at the center of the destruction, and two figures were faintly visible. Tsunade really hoped that she could reinforce Jiraiya, but now the place that needed her most was not the center of the battlefield, but Kiba Hospital. This sudden attack, like a natural disaster, must have caused a lot of injuries to Konoha's civilians and ninjas. He must do his best to help these injured people recover from their injuries and face the possible invasion in the future. After meeting with many medical ninjas in Kiba Hospital, Tsunade immediately summoned a large number of slugs, so that each medical ninja had at least one slug clone. As long as they encountered a troublesome injury that was difficult to solve, these medical ninjas could put the slugs on the seriously injured person, and Tsunade would remotely use her own medical ninjutsu to treat these seriously injured people. Pain. Although I knew that you would invade Konoha one day, I didn't expect that this day would come so soon, so soon. Jiraiya looked at Pain standing opposite him, and said with a slightly dignified expression, "But I didn't expect you to be so ruthless. Although there are many ninjas in Wood Leaf, there are many civilians who can't guarantee their lives. Do you know how many civilians will be injured or even lose their lives with such a large-scale attack? Pain, is this your so-called way to save the ninja world?" In Jiraiya's ears, it seems that the sound of injured people and the sound of blood gushing out of the dead people constantly echoed. It's not that Jiraiya hasn't seen a bloodier scene, but such a large-scale slaughter of civilians is extremely rare in the ninja world. Most ninjas will follow the unspoken rule of not hurting civilians as much as possible, but this time Pain did too much. Such an excessive action is unacceptable to Jiraiya, and it made Jiraiya angry. But hearing Jiraiya's angry question or reprimand, Pain didn't seem to be moved at all. He looked at Jiraiya and said coldly to Jiraiya, "For long-term peace, what's wrong with making such a small sacrifice?" Pain's plain tone made Jiraiya even angrier. "Who do you think you are? You can treat the lives of such people as a number, as a sacrifice that can be abandoned at will. Who am I?" Pain looked at Jiraiya and said very indifferently, "I told you a long time ago, I'm a person who walks in the world on behalf of God. In other words, I am God." Jiraiya originally wanted to let Pain or Nagato know that what he did was not a good thing before he started. But the more he talked about Pain's attitude of treating human life as nothing, the angrier Jiraiya felt. Since there is nothing to say, he can only use his fist to prove that he is right. Right? Rushing towards Pain, the two of them began a close combat, one with bare hands and the other with a black iron rod. Jiraiya fought back and forth, and even with his many years of combat experience, Jiraiya even had a certain advantage. But Jiraiya's heart couldn't relax at all, because Jiraiya knew that Tendo in front of him was only a part of Pain's Rakudo. There are more forces that have not been taken out by Nagato, or they are fighting in other places of the Wood Leaf. Such a guess appeared in Jiraiya's heart, making Jiraiya more and more anxious. Chapter 477. While Jiraiya and Pain were fighting, Tsunade used the slug clones she summoned to heal the injured civilians and ninjas in the Wood Leaf. In a slightly remote corner of the Wood Leaf, it looked so abrupt at this moment. This was because the surroundings of the mansion were clearly in ruins, but the mansion didn't seem to be damaged at all. If one took a closer look at this house that was out of place with its surroundings, it wouldn't be difficult to discover that this house was covered by a thin layer of barrier. A kind of power from the heaven and earth seemed to be under the control of someone to protect this house. This courtyard was Nangong's home. Naturally, Nangongja, who could also control natural energy, had already sensed Pain's presence when he appeared above the Wood Leaf and began to accumulate energy. However, Nangongja did not choose to rush to Wood Leaf's aid. Instead, he hurriedly brought his family back to his home. After arranging Nangong Ro, Mashiro, and Little Linger to a relatively safe place in his house, Nangongja stood in his courtyard and stuck his tribulation sword in the middle of the courtyard. Channeling a large amount of natural energy into the defensive formation he had set up around the courtyard earlier, it was amplified by the natural energy. The originally extremely powerful formation was almost 300% effective. Even Tendo Pain's Super Shinra Tensei could only shake the defensive formation a little. The door of Nangong's house was slowly opened from the inside, as if they had sensed that the sudden calamitous attack had ended. Mashiro cautiously peeked his head out from the door as he asked Nangongja, who was standing in the courtyard, Gong, what's the situation?" As soon as he finished this sentence, Mashiro saw the ruins piled up like a mountain outside his house because he was standing at a slightly higher position. Although Mashiro can be considered to be experienced and knowledgeable, he usually saw a scene of dozens or hundreds of people fighting at most. Compared to the scene of blood and wailing everywhere, it was simply a small thing. Mashiro lightly covered her mouth, as if she was trying to suppress the scream that was about to come out of her mouth. But after hearing Mashiro's question, Nangongja still looked at the empty place in front of him with a serious face. He didn't look back, but his tone was extremely serious as he said to Mashiro, "Mashiro, go back now. Take Mashiro and Little Linger to the basement I prepared for you." He immediately activated all the formations in the room. Immediately. Now. Nangongja's sudden order caught Mashiro off guard. But after a long time of relying on Nangongja and respecting Nangongja's orders, Mashiro instinctively rushed into his house, bringing Little Linger and Mashiro to the mysterious basement that Nangongja usually wouldn't let them enter. Mashiro didn't know how powerful this basement was, but Nangongja was very clear about it. When Nangongja first subdued the Blood Garment Pavilion and returned to the Wood Leaf, Nangongja was actually worried about whether the Wood Leaf could completely guarantee the safety of his family. So after Nangongja gained the ability, he referred to various ancient books and secret techniques from the Blood Garment Pavilion and built a secret room for himself in his house. This secret room wasn't big, but Nangongja carved at least a few hundred defensive and counterattack formations in it. As long as all the formations were activated, Nangongja might not be able to forcibly break through them, even if he used all his strength. He might even be seriously injured due to the various formations. This was the last resort Nangongja prepared for his family. If there was something he couldn't solve, Nangongzhi would use all his strength to directly activate the spatial jump formation carved on the outside of this secret room. He would directly transfer this secret room to the Lion Clan's alternate space. He believed that this would ensure the safety of his family, right? Knowing that he had nothing to worry about, Nangongzhi finally slowly pulled out the long sword he stabbed into the ground and pointed the tip of his sword at an empty space in front of him. His words were cold and sharp. Nangongzhi slowly said, "That's right. Since you're here, then show yourself. In front of swordsmen, all dirty tricks are laughable." That's right. Nangongzhi felt that someone had invaded his home. That's why he immediately let Mashiro bring Little Linger and Nangong Ro to the secret room he had prepared. On one hand, it was to ensure the safety of his family. On the other hand, it was to make himself less restrained in battle. After Nangongzhi's voice fell, the space in front of him slowly distorted. A figure wearing a whirlpool mask and a black uniform with red clouds stood in front of Nangongzhi. Only one of his eyes was revealed as he looked at Nangongzhi with a smile that wasn't a smile. Hoodlum. Regarding the information of Akatsuki organization, Nangongzhi had always personally checked it. Regarding this person who had suddenly appeared in Akatsuki organization, and there was almost no other information about him, Nangongzhi was also very cautious. Because in Nangongzhi's view, Pain or Nagato wasn't the kind of person who was particularly good at scheming and scheming. In the eyes of such a person who regarded himself as God, perhaps no amount of scheming was more useful than his ability to surpass the common people. But in these years, the Akatsuki was silent and even used a lot of dirty tricks to seize benefits for themselves. Such things didn't sound like something Pain would do. Therefore, Nangongzhi boldly guessed that perhaps there was a person who was good at scheming in the Akatsuki, giving advice and strategizing for Pain and the Akatsuki. And after Hoodlum appeared, this guess became more and more trustworthy. But Nangongzhi didn't have time to confirm all of this. Hoodlum had already appeared in front of him. The obvious spatial fluctuations were enough to prove that Hoodlum was a person who was proficient in spatial ninjutsu. This was really a headache. As someone who understood Watergate and had touched the surface of spatial abilities, Nangongzhi fully understood how difficult and terrifying it was to deal with a person who was proficient in spatial ninjutsu. For such a person, challenging someone of a higher level and insta-killing someone was simply a common occurrence. There was nothing to be surprised about. Chapter 478. It's rare for the famous would Leaf King of Hell to remember a nobody like me. Should I feel honored? Hoodlum looked at Nangongzhi with a hint of mockery. Just as Hoodlum had said, he was a nameless person, but it was precisely because he was a nobody that people feared, to be able to hide everything and carry out their actions silently in the dark. Such a person was more frightening than those ambitious people who stood in the open. What's your purpose? Seeing Hoodlum appear directly in front of him without attacking, Nangongzhi knew that Hoodlum must have something to say or conditions to discuss with him. Therefore, Nangongzhi didn't want to pretend to be polite with Hoodlum and directly talked about the topic. When Hoodlum saw Nangongzhi's attitude, he let out a soft laugh and said to Nangongzhi, "I can see that you're a Wood Leaf King of Hell. Even though you're called the Wood Leaf King of Hell, I can see that you're not brainwashed by the Wood Leaf King of Hell. You don't see the Wood Leaf King of Hell as everything you want to protect. After Pain attacked, you didn't respond to the Wood Leaf King of Hell's call and chose to stay at home to protect your family." Nangongzhi didn't want to deny Hoodlum's words. After all, even though Nangongzhi occasionally helped the Wood Leaf King of Hell, it was because the Wood Leaf King of Hell paid a price. Or rather, it was because Nangongzhi felt like it. Nangongzhi was never a person who would sacrifice his life to protect the Wood Leaf King of Hell. For Nangongzhi, the only people he could sacrifice his life for were his family members. Other than his family members and people he recognized, the others were dispensable. Even though it sounded cruel and cold-blooded, Nangongzhi wasn't ashamed at all because this was the path that Nangongzhi chose for himself. Continue, After hearing Nangong's words, Hoodlum felt that he had grasped the rhythm of the conversation with Nangongja. Thus, he slowly nodded and continued to speak to Nangongja. I came here to make a simple deal with someone like you, who is called King of Hell. Our Akatsuki's goal is very simple, which is to obtain the Nine Tails Column Force from the Woodleaf Village. There is no direct conflict between us. I came here to see you in the hope that you won't have any direct conflict with us during this period. After all, as the head of the Blood Pavilion, who cultivates internal chi, you don't have much of a relationship with us ninjas. Continue living your life of Hell's life. Continue to enjoy your indifferent life. Hoodlum, Nangongja Nangong. Nangongja King of Hell Hell Hell. King of Hell 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 Hell. In the past, when Nangongja wasn't that strong, in order to make a living, Nangongja was in the limelight. However, when Nangongja's strength and influence started to expand, Nangongja didn't show much ambition. On the contrary, he seemed to like living in seclusion in his own home and didn't have too much entanglement with others. Therefore, Hoodlum aimed at this point and raised his request. This kind of situation wouldn't harm Nangongja's interests and would be beneficial to him. Wasn't this exactly what the two of them wanted? Originally, Hoodlum thought that Nangongja would gladly accept his conditions. However, he discovered that Nangongja didn't loosen his grip on his sword. Instead, he tightened his grip on it. Hoodlum's brows under his mask frowned. What did he say to provoke Nangongja? Hoodlum, just as I expected, you're a qualified schemer and politician. It seems like before you came looking for me, you did a lot of research to understand my temperament and personality. Then, you came up with suitable words to persuade me to agree to your request. Perhaps all of this seems natural to you, right? After all, I don't have any feelings for Woodleaf, and I don't care about those who aren't familiar with me. However, you guessed wrong. You shouldn't use my family's safety to threaten me, or my friends' lives to threaten me. Your words are very careful, but I can still hear the danger in you and your unscrupulous attitude. The more you say, the more obvious your attitude is. I don't mind others analyzing my character, but I don't like people making decisions for me even more. Since you have become a huge threat to my family and myself, then eliminating all threats has always been my favorite way of doing things. What Nangongja said was illogical and even sounded a little unreasonable like a bandit. But after thinking about it carefully, it wasn't difficult to find that Nangongja's actions were actually in line with Nangongja's usual behavior. However, these emotional changes in Nangongja's heart were meaningless to Hoodlum. Hoodlum could analyze Nangongja's character, but there was no way to control Nangongja's thoughts or control Nangongja's soul. It's really troublesome, seeing Nangongja's expression of wanting to get rid of him. Hoodlum could only say this once again. Why do people nowadays like to do things that don't conform to common sense? Itachi was already dead, but Sasuke didn't evolve Manjikyu Sharingan as he expected. Instead, he transplanted Itachi's eyes into Manjikyu Sharingan, and Nangongja, who was standing in front of him, was even more out of his expectations. Obviously, there were no conditions that could threaten Nangongja's interests, but Nangongja didn't hesitate to start a war with him. At this moment, he looked like he was full of fighting spirit. It was really as Hoodlum had said. Everything was so troublesome. Hoodlum took out a scroll from his arms and looked coldly at Nangongja. Originally, everything was negotiable, but since you're so uncooperative, in order to prevent you from becoming a threat to my future plans, it's better for me to eliminate you directly. Hoodlum tore open the scroll in his hand, and 2 clouds of smoke appeared next to him. After the smoke dissipated, 2 doppelgangers of the 6 paths appeared before Nangongja. They had orange hair and wore black uniforms with red clouds on them. Their faces were densely packed with black iron rods that would make one's hair stand on end. Chapter 479. The 2 Rakudo clones standing opposite Nangongja were Pain and Pain of Ajura, who had been destroyed by Jiraiya but had been restored. These two Rikudo clones were chosen by Pain and Hoodlum after careful discussion. They were the two most effective clones to deal with Xianxia, aside from Pain of Tendo. Rindo was good at close combat. Coupled with his special ability to extract souls, Rindo was a big killer in close combat. On the other hand, Xianxia himself was a martial artist who cultivated internal strength. Although he also had a long-range and close-range attack like Sword Chi, he would still choose to engage in close-range combat due to his instinctive attacking methods. Therefore, the human Dao was actually very suitable to deal with Xianxia's six-path doppelgangers. Pain of Azura was a long-range attacker who was good at using a variety of firearms. The barrage of bullets and the range of missiles were also very troublesome for an internal strength practitioner like Xianxia. Although the damage of bullets and missiles was limited for Xianxia, they could still play a role in restraining him. If Pain of Tendo could also participate in this battle, he could use his gravity and repulsion to control Xianxia's movements. He could then form a circle with Rindo and Pain of Azura to suppress Xianxia. However, this attack on Wood Leaf wasn't to eliminate Xianxia, but to capture Nine Tails. Therefore, Pain naturally had to focus more on Naruto. Even the two Rikudo clones summoned by Hoodlum were only a backup plan. The best situation was naturally for Xianxia to accept Hoodlum's suggestion, but Hoodlum didn't seem to be ready to show his true strength. So Nagato decided that if things didn't work out, he could only transfer two Six Paths clones from the already compact combat force to cooperate with Hoodlum to restrain Xianxia. After a short moment of sluggishness, the Rikudo clones began to observe their surroundings. When Pain saw Xianxia standing in front of him with a face full of battle intent and a black longsword in his hand, reflecting a different kind of brilliance under the sunlight, his expression was still very calm. However, he couldn't help but say to Hoodlum in a helpless tone, "Don't worry. It seems like your plan has failed. Scheming is just a small matter. In the end, you still need to use force to solve all problems." Being ridiculed by Pain of Rindo, Hoodlum didn't show much disappointment. After all, Hoodlum had a certain degree of vigilance against Pain. After Pain's two Rikudo clones appeared, Hoodlum didn't act as confident as he did in front of Xianxia. I don't know how this Xianxia's brain works. It's obviously a win-win proposition, but he rejected it. I can't do anything about it. After saying that, Hoodlum even spread out his hands to show his helplessness. If Pain didn't know that collecting tailed beasts was one of Hoodlum's firm goals, he might have thought that Hoodlum was deliberately provoking Xianxia so that Xianxia could wear down his strength. Such a sinister idea seemed a bit inconceivable. After all, how could there be internal strife in the face of a powerful enemy? But Pain, who knows Hoodlum very well, can tell everyone very seriously that according to Hoodlum's usual behavior, this kind of thing is just child's play. Scheming, eloquence, and other things are as simple as eating and drinking for a person like Hoodlum. As long as it's to achieve his goals, there's no price that Hoodlum can't pay, no dignity that Hoodlum can't abandon, and no means that Hoodlum can't use. Pain doesn't know what kind of environment created such a person like Hoodlum, but Pain has a deep fear of such a person who is temporarily his ally. As for the legendary Uchiha Madara that Hoodlum has been talking about, Nagato didn't believe it from the beginning. How could a person who can pacify the war of the shinobi world with his own strength and establish Wood Leaf Village with the shinobi god Senju Takuma be such a person who only knows how to scheme? Just when Hoodlum and Pain were looking at each other, Xianxia's voice broke the strange atmosphere between Pain and Hoodlum. "I say, are you done yet? I generously let you gather your strength. I want to see what kind of powerful ninja the Akatsuki's god and the one behind the scenes is. But your affectionate gaze makes me wonder if there's something wrong with your orientation." Xianxia's tone was filled with indescribable disgust and disdain. It seems that in Xianxia's heart, Hoodlum and Pain may have cooperated because of each other's twisted orientation. Although they knew that Xianxia deliberately used such words to anger the two of them, making them lose their minds in the following battle. But Hoodlum and Pain were still angered by Xianxia's words. Needless to say, How could a person who regards himself as a god accept a mortal questioning him? Although Hoodlum's face was covered by a mask, it was obvious that Hoodlum's aura was fluctuating at the moment, fully showing that his heart was not calm at all. He also had a woman he loved the most, and even his current actions could be said to be for the sake of his beloved woman who had left this world. For Hoodlum, this person was a taboo that no one could touch. Although Nangong's words had another meaning, it was still unbearable for Hoodlum. Courting death. Courting death. Although the two of them were still suspicious of each other, because of Nangong's intentional words, they joined forces and simultaneously declared their intention to attack Nangongja. Looking at Ren Jiandao and Hoodlum charging toward him, as well as the densely packed gun and cannon muzzles on Azura's body, the corners of Nangong's lips curled up slightly. How long has it been since I last fought with my full strength? Although Nangongja really liked to stay at home and spend his days with his family, as a martialist, Nangongja's blood was also filled with the desire to fight. Nangongja's body actually started to tremble from excitement when the three people who were at or above the shadow level launched their attacks at him at the same time. His blood was boiling at this moment. Chapter 480. Behind Mount Mayaboku, Watergate, who was sitting cross-legged and cultivating sage mode, suddenly had his calm aura disrupted. Watergate's eyebrows knitted together beautifully. The fluctuation of his spirit caused the immortal technique chakra, which was constantly harmonizing in Watergate's body, to become restless. The balance between natural energy, physical energy, and spiritual energy was instantly broken. Watergate's skin also began to slowly turn into a toad-like bluish-gray color. Pieces of flesh quietly appeared on Watergate's cheeks. Seeing the changes in Watergate, Xianxia, who was squatting on the side with a thick wooden stick in her hand, immediately took action. Her petite body leaped up high and fiercely knocked Watergate's head with the wooden stick in her hand, forcing all the berserk natural energy in Watergate's body out of his body. When the natural energy was completely expelled, Watergate's constantly changing body finally returned to its original state. When the natural energy in his body was forcibly expelled due to his failure to harmonize the natural energy, some of his physical energy and spiritual energy would also be expelled from his body. Therefore, Watergate's face had become somewhat pale, and he seemed to be somewhat weak. However, Watergate didn't seem to care about how bad his physical condition was, because at this moment, Watergate's eyes were full of anger. Such anger lingered in Watergate's heart, making it difficult for Watergate to get rid of it. He could only stare into the distance with a pair of red eyes. The anger in his eyes even had a feeling that it was about to burst out. Watergate brat, what's wrong with you? You haven't had such a serious natural energy outbreak since the end of the first stage of cultivation. Xianxia actually regarded Watergate as her nephew. She asked with a bit of anxiety and a bit of affection. Minato, who was usually modest and polite, had completely lost his usual little son attitude. Instead, he stood up angrily and yelled toward the sky. What are you doing? What are you going to do? Pain, I Watergate, swear to kill you. Swear to kill you. Seeing Watergate's abnormal appearance, Xianxia's eyes were full of worry. When she heard Watergate say the name Pain, Xianxia couldn't help but have a feeling of fear in her heart. As if something bad had happened, she wanted to go forward and say something to Watergate to calm him down. However, when Watergate was meditating, Fukasaku-Sanin, who was suddenly summoned, appeared behind him and put his hand on his wife. Fukasaku-Sanin's body. Obviously, Fukasaku-Sanin already had a plan in his heart. After shouting a few times towards the sky, Watergate seemed to have finally calmed down the excitement in his heart. Although there was still anger in his eyes, he had obviously calmed down. Seeing that Watergate had calmed down, Fukasaku-Sanin also took a few steps forward with a dignified expression and came in front of Watergate. It seems that you already know what happened in Woodleaf, right? When Watergate heard Fukasaku-Sanin's words, He immediately stared at Fukasaku Sanin. Although he didn't speak, the meaning in his eyes was obviously hoping that Fukasaku Sanin, who seemed to know everything, would explain it to him. Just now, when you were still cultivating, little Jiraiya suddenly summoned me. With a bit of pain, Fukasaku Sanin said to Watergate with a dignified expression. It seems that everything happened so suddenly that little Jiraiya didn't have time to block your shadow clone's actions. So your shadow clone sent you the information about Woodleaf. That's right, at this moment, Pain is attacking Woodleaf Village. I left early, so I don't know what scale of invasion Woodleaf has suffered, but judging from your reaction, Woodleaf must have suffered heavy losses at the moment. Please let me go back. Let me go back and fight with my sensei. With a bit of firmness and a bit of pleading, Watergate said to Fukasaku Sanin, Mount Mayaboku is actually a relatively independent space. Without the permission of these toads of Mount Mayaboku, Watergate can't leave Mount Mayaboku at will. When Sensei fought with Pain before, I couldn't feel it in time. But at that time, Sensei used Sage Mode, but the situation was still so miserable. This time, you and Shima Sanin didn't leave, so there is no way for Jiraiya to enter Sage Mode when he came. In this case, Sensei still wants to fight with Pain. What's the difference between that and death? In the end, Watergate's voice has become no different from a roar because of anger and excitement. But Fukasaku Sanin didn't feel angry because of Watergate's rudeness. At this moment, Fukasaku Sanin's heart was also full of anger. At this moment, the anger brought by Watergate's roar was simply dispensable compared to the anger in Fukasaku Sanin's heart at this moment. Jumping high from the ground, Fukasaku Sanin clenched his toad into the shape of a fist and punched directly on Watergate's head. The fist with anger and chakra directly knocked Watergate down. Watergate could only sit on the ground, looking at Fukasaku Sanin. He didn't seem to understand why Fukasaku Sanin suddenly hit him. Do you think I'm willing to watch Jiraiya fight with Pain? Jiraiya is also a child I watched grow up step by step. If I could choose, I would rather fight with Jiraiya now. But I can't, because I have more important things to do. That is to let you master Sage Mode, so you can grasp the opportunity to defeat Pain. Jiraiya can only master Sage Mode to an imperfect level because of his aptitude. The imperfect Sage Mode makes it impossible for Jiraiya to gain more power, but you are different. According to your current situation, the Sage Mode you practice is almost miraculously perfect. If you master the perfect Sage Mode, we may be able to end the Sun of War and eliminate this war that swept the shinobi world. When Jiraiya's life and the lives of all the people in the entire shinobi world are on the same scale, what should I choose? If it's rational, naturally the whole shinobi world is more important. But if it's emotional, I really don't want Jiraiya to lose his life like this. I was so hesitant, so I didn't know how to choose. So I endured the grief in my heart and returned to Mount Mayaboku. In order to let you master Sage Mode as soon as possible, so that I can get the best of both worlds. Watergate boy, do you understand what I mean? Chapter 481. After listening to Fukasaku Sanin's words, Watergate finally stabilized his emotions completely. Whether it was anger or sadness, they were all removed from Watergate's eyes, or they were forcibly suppressed. Because Watergate knew that no matter how sad and angry he was, it didn't make any sense. He wouldn't let Pain suffer any harm, and he would lose the opportunity to save Woodleaf and his sensei. The focus of everything is still on Sage Mode. As long as he succeeds in practicing it, then everything will be solved. After figuring out the key points, Watergate also stood in the place where he meditated before. But Watergate knew that it was impossible to master Sage Mode in a short time with his current practice speed. So Watergate suddenly remembered the practice method Naruto showed when he practiced wind release with his child before. Ninjutsu, multiple shadow, clone technique. Clouds of smoke were produced around Watergate. When the smoke dissipated, it could be seen that Watergate had summoned 9 shadow clones through shadow clone technique, plus Watergate himself, a total of 10 Watergate were standing there. Watergate. You are looking at Watergate suddenly creating his own shadow clones. Fukusaku Sunin seemed to be thinking about the meaning of Watergate's actions. But soon, Fukusaku Sunin understood Minato's intention. The shadow clone jutsu could reflect all his experiences back to his original body. So, wouldn't it be twice the effort for half the result if he used a shadow clone jutsu? But after Fukusaku Sunin thought of the advantages brought by shadow clone technique, he also thought of the adverse effects after excessive use of shadow clone technique. A lot of fatigue and chakra consumption are fed back to the main body, which is likely to cause the main body to faint or even deeper damage. Fukusaku Sunin understood these things, and Watergate was naturally more clear. But looking at Watergate's resolute appearance now, it was obvious that he also calculated the damage to himself. Immortals, I'll have to trouble you to watch over my cultivation. Bowing slightly to Fukusaku Sunin and Shima Sunin, Watergate led his 9 shadow clones to sit on the ground and began to guide natural energy into his body, mixing it into chakra mode, allowing himself to practice sage mode. Fukusaku Sunin and Shima Sunin looked at Watergate, who was sitting on the ground and had begun to harmonize the natural energy, and then looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. After that, they could only walk toward the place where Watergate was sitting cross-legged with a stick in their hands. In the courtyard of Nangongji's house, Nangongji and Pain were fighting in close combat. Because of his special ability, Pain mostly used his palms to fight against Nangongji's sword when he attacked. It must be known that Heaven's Retribution Sword with sword energy was extremely sharp, but Pain also seemed to have an extremely deep experience in using his palms to fight against sharp weapons. Every time Nangongji used his swordsmanship against Pain, Pain always used his palms to avoid Nangongji's Heaven's Retribution Sword. And Nangongji was naturally happy to see that his opponent was such a ninja who was good at close combat. Only such an experienced and powerful taijutsu ninja could hone his swordsmanship. So in fact, when Nangongji fought with Pain, he didn't go all out. After all, he didn't have to win the battle against Hoodlum and Pain's Rakuto. In fact, Nangongji also took this opportunity to vent his excessive desire to fight. At the same time, he helped with Leaf to contain the invading enemy. It could be considered as reporting back to the people who lived in with Leaf over the years. Seeing Nangongji and Pain fighting back and forth, Hoodlum seemed to be impatient. A Rakuto clone was able to tie down Nangongji so tightly. Then, if the opportunity was right, would he be able to eliminate Nangongji? Such a threat? For Hoodlum, Nangongji was indeed an unstable factor. This was because ever since Nangongji entered his peak, he rarely fought. Most of the time, he stayed at home. Hoodlum didn't have a very clear estimate of Nangongji's strength. Hoodlum felt that he couldn't easily let go of a person who he didn't understand and had such a strong strength. So Hoodlum's body disappeared from where he was originally standing and suddenly appeared behind Nangongji. In his hand, he was holding kunai. Obviously, he was prepared to take advantage of the fact that Nangongji was tied down by Nangongji. But after seeing Hoodlum's actions, whether it was Pain or Pain's face had some inexplicable strange expressions. It was like a child who was playing a prank. Their eyes contained a bit of slyness and schadenfreude. And Nangongji naturally also noticed Hoodlum, who suddenly appeared behind him. Originally, Nangongji was able to fight to his heart's content with Pain's taijutsu, but at this moment, he was slightly unhappy. Originally, he wanted to fight with Pain and let himself relax. After that, he was too lazy to care about what these Akatsuki ninjas were doing. But now, Hoodlum actually appeared behind him and was prepared to attack him. Nangongji couldn't turn a blind eye to this. This guy, glancing at Hoodlum, who was standing behind him, Nangongji's eyebrows slightly wrinkled together. Obviously, he was somewhat unhappy. Teach him a lesson. The speed of Heaven's disaster sword in his hand increased. The sword's shadow began to become more and more blurred. As the sword speed became faster and faster, Sword Chi actually split from Heaven's disaster sword. One turned into two, 2 turned into 4, 4 turned into 8. At first glance, there was a kind of endless feeling. Scatter. The condensed sword chi around heaven's disaster sword scattered under Nangong's thought. Suddenly, they rushed towards Hoodlum, who was standing behind him. The sword chi wrapped around Hoodlum, blocking all his escape routes. And Hoodlum naturally also discovered that he was facing a dangerous situation. He wanted to use his space ninjutsu to escape, but when he was about to enter his space, a feeling of fear suddenly appeared in his heart. Hoodlum could only quickly cut off the connection between himself and the space. This feeling of crisis disappeared. Since you are only willing to take out your trump card when you are forced into a desperate situation, then of course, I will satisfy your request and let you experience a crisis. Injecting his sword chi into the sword in his hand, a crescent-shaped sword chi rushed in the direction of Rendo. When Rendo saw that Nangongja suddenly forced him to retreat, he was very curious about what Nangongja would do next. Pain now understood that although Nangong just seemed to be full of fighting spirit, in fact, he didn't have any killing intent. What Nangongja wanted to do at the moment was to entangle the 3 of them and give Wood Leaf a chance. Now Tendo Pain was entangled by Jiraiya, and Rendo Pain and Shirato Pain were also entangled by Nangongja. 3 of Pain's 6 paths were gone, but the remaining 3 Gakido, Jigakudo, and Chikishoto were not so easy to deal with. At least in the perception of Rendo, the other 4 6 paths doppelgangers who were not with him have not lost any of their members. In this case, even if they were entangled by Nangongja, what could they do? Doesn't it also mean that Nangongja is also trapped here? And Wood Leaf has been attacked for so long. As the 4th Hokage, Namake's Watergate has not appeared yet. Does it mean that Namake's Watergate is not in the range of Wood Leaf right now? There were only 3 Kage-level powerhouses in Wood Leaf. Jiraiya was entangled by Tendo, Nangongja was entangled by the 2 of them, and Hoodlum. Tsunade was already struggling to treat the wounded. As long as the other 3 6 paths doppelgangers found any information about Naruto, then he would immediately send Conan, who was guarding him, to cooperate with the other 3 6 paths doppelgangers to capture the 9 tails who could only transform into Rokubi mode according to the information Column Force, who had not fully opened the seal yet. In Pain's eyes, the goddess of victory had already begun to smile at him. No, he himself was a god walking in the human world. He did not need the goddess of victory's care, because he was a god, right? Thinking of this, Pain looked at Hoodlum, who was trapped in the sword formation, with some schadenfreude. Just as Pain was worried that Hoodlum would deliberately weaken his strength and deliberately cause a conflict between him and Nangongja, once he encountered an opportunity to weaken such a schemer, Pain was naturally willing to facilitate such a thing to happen. For Pain, the most useful thing was actually Hoodlum's cunning mind. After all, Pain was self-aware. Although he could do such a thing, it would often be full of loopholes. He was still not as skilled as Hoodlum, who was immersed in conspiracy for a long time. But as for Hoodlum's strength, Pain felt that the weaker Hoodlum was the better. As a guy who relied on his brain to make a living, if he had a sword in his hand that was enough to kill his master, wouldn't it be too dangerous? Everyone has been in the shinobi world for so many years. What kind of people haven't they seen, and what kind of things they haven't experienced? It's just a simple trap for someone who is a threat to him. For Pain, there is no psychological pressure at all. Chapter 483. When Nangongja forced Pain to retreat, Nangongja's figure instantly appeared beside the sword formation that trapped Hoodlum. Nangongja gently swiped his finger across the tribulation sword in his hand. a tiny black dot of light that gave off a dangerous aura that could not be ignored rotated at the tip of his finger. Nangongzhi used his mind to check the dot of light that came from the tribulation sword. He seemed to find that it had stabilized. Nangongzhi nodded slightly and pointed his finger at the sword formation. The black dot of light rushed towards the sword formation as if it had received an order. It was like a drop of thick ink in a glass of white water. The originally transparent sword chi with a slight blue luster was now completely dyed black. If one looked carefully at the sword chi that had been dyed black, it was not difficult to see that there were traces of black lightning floating on it from time to time. This black speck of light was a strand of chi of heavenly thunder that Nangongzhi had extracted from the tribulation sword in his hand. The tribulation sword was a divine weapon that had been born under the heavenly punishment by chance. In the process of familiarizing himself with the tribulation sword, his grasp of the tribulation lightning within the tribulation sword became stronger and stronger. Right now, Nangongzhi was using Hoodlum, who was trapped in the sword formation, to try and integrate the heavenly punishment lightning into his sword chi. After all, he wasn't that proficient and couldn't integrate the heavenly punishment lightning directly into his sword chi. Therefore, Nangongzhi could only temporarily force away Pain, who was fighting with him, to attack Hoodlum from the side of the sword formation with his sword chi. When the tribulation lightning was integrated into the sword chi, Hoodlum could clearly feel that the attack he had to endure directly increased by a level. Every time Hoodlum's extremely hard and tough wooden stick that was condensed from chakra intersected with the sword chi, an extremely destructive lightning would be released from the sword chi and invade the wooden stick in his hand. If Hoodlum had not discovered it in time and used chakra to separate his hand from the wooden stick in his hand, the lightning would have invaded his body. After receiving 6 or 7 sword chis, the wooden stick in Hoodlum's hand had already turned from a strange white color to a charred black from the high temperature. Hoodlum sensed that the wooden stick in his hand couldn't withstand more sword chi attacks, so he diverted some of his attention to human Dao Pain and Azura Dao Pain, who were watching from afar. His eyes flashed with annoyance. Although his teleportation ability could not be used due to the sudden sense of crisis, he actually still had many methods to resist Nangongzhi's sword chi. However, these methods could expose his ability. Revealing this level of Mokutan ninjutsu was already the limit of Hoodlum's power. He brandished the wooden stick in his hand, shattering the sword chi that was difficult to dodge. The wooden stick in his hand also broke into several charcoal-like pieces after a crisp sound. Hoodlum looked at Pain and said loudly, "Pain, are you going to just watch like this? It doesn't matter if I die, but if your plan for me is gone, there will be a lot of inconveniences, right? You know you are." Hoodlum didn't continue his words, but the thread in his words was so obvious. Pain, who was standing in front of Nagato, frowned slightly. As a proud person, Pain didn't like the feeling of being threatened. However, Pain knew that under his indulgence, Nangongzhi had already forced Hoodlum to a certain extent. Since Hoodlum didn't care about their relationship and started to threaten him, he couldn't just let it slide. He nodded to Azura Dao Pain behind him, indicating for Azura Dao Pain to use his ability to rescue Hoodlum from this predicament. Shura Realm and Mortal Realm, who were telepathic, naturally understood each other's thoughts. Shura Realm Pain's head suddenly split from the middle like a puppet. Shura Realm Pain's head didn't have the various organs that a normal person should have. Instead, there was a strange energy-gathering device in his head. This is the most powerful weapon of the Shura Realm, which has a variety of thermal weapons. This is a chakra cannon similar to a particle cannon. A large amount of energy is condensed in this chakra gathering device. After accumulating power for a period of time, a thick energy beam shining with white light with a red halo shot out from Shura Dao Pain's head. This energy pillar rushed towards Nangongzhi and the sword formation that imprisoned Hoodlum at a speed that was beyond what could be seen with the naked eye. Nangongzhi immediately became alert and channeled all of his internal energy into his legs as he jumped up with all his might. After narrowly dodging the powerful particle cannon, Nangongja returned to his senses and looked at the sword formation that trapped Hoodlum. At this moment, Azura Dao Pain's energy pillar and the Sword Chi sword array had formed a strange state of equilibrium. Both sides were constantly wearing down the energy contained in each other. The sword Chi's, sword arrays, and particle beams from the particle cannons disappeared at the same time. Hoodlum's figure charged out from the shock waves caused by the collision of the two types of energy. After Hoodlum rushed out from the shock wave, he was in a sorry state. Hoodlum's black Akatsuki robe with red clouds on it had been slashed several times. Although there was still a layer of clothing underneath, Hoodlum's skin could still be seen through some of the deeper wounds. Hoodlum's skin color was similar to the pale white color of wood when he used wood release. This proved that Hoodlum had modified his body to a certain extent. Seems like Hoodlum's body has many secrets. What Nangongja could see, Pain naturally saw it too. Although he didn't say much, the fear in Pain's eyes became more and more profound. You're tuning in to the Eternal Immortal Ballad YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.